Pa, 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 pa. Hello, everybody. How are we doing today? My lighting is terrible. Bear with me, all right? It's been a long day. And your boy's not been doing this for a while. So thank you all for joining me on this fine Sunday. But the podcast's back. We have guests booked in for the rest of the month. So yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. I'm feel a little bit like nervous, a bit anxious because I haven't been here for a while, but I know my loving, supporting fans will help me through. But yeah, let's go through some comments quickly, do some housekeeping, and then we're going to get into this one. Waiting for this as someone who struggles with depression and anxiety. This is important that it is important my ornate Nile monitor working with her and raising help me feel. Thank you for sharing. And I feel like there might be a lot of sharing tonight. We're going to see. But Bam is right. Mental health is not spoken about, except for some reason, me. I talk about it every day. Yes, don't worry, the podcasts are back. 21 people. Like the video, ladies and gentlemen. I know we're a little bit late, but myself and the guests were having a good conversation, so I didn't want to cut it too short. And then I remembered we get to talk about it anyway. So, hello, Gary. Hello, Bam. Wow, Paul's monitors in chat. How lucky are we today, guys? How are we all doing? I'm stoked on this one as well. Paul's very open about mental health. I've had many private convos with him. Helps a lot. It's always good to get outside perspective. I appreciate you, Gary. My DMs are always open to anybody that just needs to talk to a stranger. How are we doing? How are we doing? How are we doing? How are we doing? Oh, actually, I've just remembered, everybody. Bear with me. Happy birthday to Michael. I don't know if he's here or not, but Mr. Longfield himself, the guy that runs my Discord, great friend of mine. Couldn't really do a lot of the stuff I do without him, to be honest. So if he is here, I don't know if he is here or not, but if he is here, happy birthday, Michael. So we're going to have that running whilst I go through these comments and also shout out the Patreon, but we'll do that in a second. Then we're going to get into this. But there's a lot of comments, so I am just going to skip through and see if anything's relevant. Hello, Dan. How you doing, my friend? Oh, yeah. Apparently today, as I crouch to 30, I might become a member of Slipper Gang because my feet were incredibly cold today and the Crocs did not cut it. What's up, Riddler? How you doing? What's up, Serpentine, my friend? How we doing? Hopefully I haven't missed everybody because I am just skipping through. Hello, Amy. Thank you for tuning in. Mr. Scandinavian Guanas is here today. Hello, Mr. Scandinavian Guanas. How you doing? Hello, Dom. Hello, Dom. Damn. This will be interesting. I got my first Reptile / Acumen 2 years ago. It's been stressful, but super rewarding experience. Welcome to Monitors, my friend, but we will get into the nitty gritty. I've just come off night shift. No one expected any different, Riddler. Hello, Ruben. Thank you for tuning in. I'm hoping I'm saying this right. Poi. I'm not going to try. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, BH. Thank you for tuning in. Are we all bright, Paul, today? Yeah, the lighting is like... I tried. I really did try, but I also can't be bothered anymore. What's up, Bailey? How you doing, my friend? Your recent video of Mango made me realize my question enclosure had been stagnated, so now I'm changing things up. That's what we like to see. Always moving this way, not this way. That's what we like. Where we at? Happy birthday, Michael. Happy birthday, Michael. What's good, Logan? How you doing, my friend? Slipper Gang, blah, blah, blah. Aussie boy. I don't think I've seen you before. How you doing, my friend? Thank you for tuning in. Paul getting a rack and slippers. Yeah, I know. It's all gone downhill for me, guys. Hello, Rick. How we doing, my friend? How we doing? Right, okay. I've caught up. Let's do a quick housekeeping and let's get into this podcast. So, thank you to the Patreon. Link is in the description. If anyone would like to consider joining the Patreon, you do not have to, but I will love you dearly if you do. I need to get rid of your comment, Rick, because you're stealing other people's names. Yeah, there's some secret private stuff over there on the private Discord. I don't really post on the Patreon, but I post on the Discord. I'm quite active on the Discord. So if you guys do want to consider joining me, all the rewards, all the tiers are exactly the same. So you can just choose how much you want to support from as little as £2 a month. You can come and join the private Discord and find out what I've got going on behind the scenes and talk about a bunch of different stuff. And then also shout out to the Bug Factory. We haven't said that in a while. Shout out Bug Factory. If you use Paul /Monitor /5 for a 5% off your first order on where I found the cheapest live food here in the UK. Good guys and girls over there at Bug Factory. I believe in them. They believe in me. Please go and check them out. Jesus Christ, I clicked the wrong button. Please go and check them out. Use my code. Last few comments, and then we're going to get into this podcast. What's popping, Rick? How are we doing? Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Matt. It's happy birthday, Michael. He's here now. Alistair, maybe? Alistair? Crowley. Woohoo. Maybe that might be what I'm calling one of my animals that may or may not hatch. Anyway, without further ado, everyone, all right, we've been on a bit of a rant, but we're going to get into this podcast now. We have Flash, the Aki monitor, Samuel. Hello.
Yo, how you doing today, man?
I'm okay. As we said off air, let's just start with that. Normally, someone says, "How are you doing?" I go, "I'm okay." You know that's a lie because I've just told you that I'm not okay. But I'm okay. I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I've been better. I've been worse. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. And I do agree. Sometimes we just said, "How you doing?" to someone and just said, "I'm okay," but just to keep going. But sometimes we don't take the time to really ask, "How are you really doing? Like, what's going on? How's life?" So I think on both sides, that's something that could be changed. One from the person that's saying I'm doing okay to actually said, "You know what? I'm not doing okay today." And to the other person to actually be able to say like, "Hey, tell me about it," because it has to work both ways. If you ask someone how they're doing and they give you the answer and you're like, "Oh damn, oh shit, I was not ready for you to talk to me for that long."
I didn't ask. Yeah.
So I think that's something that can work on both sides. So
yeah.
yeah,
I find asking twice. I find if you're like, there's a guy over here, I think it's Roman Kemp. He's like a radio DJ person over here, and he lost his friend to suicide. And I haven't watched the documentary yet. I need to watch it, but I've been waiting till I'm in a headspace to be able to watch it. But I've seen clips, and he goes around like schools in the UK, and he's talking to different people about mental health and stuff. And he finds out that a lot of boys are struggling, but they just don't tell their friends. But they find they're a bit more vulnerable if you're like, "Oh, you okay? Yeah, I'm good, mate." No. Are you okay? Like, how are you really doing? And the second ask kind of gets the walls down a little bit. But yeah, I think that's a good point to start is if you're not okay, just tell somebody. I think that's a very good place to start.
And I think especially for guys as well, because as you've mentioned, that a person going to the school asking like, because I think guys have it harder where we feel like we cannot say we're not doing okay. Like for girls, we feel like, oh, it's okay for her to share. But as guys, we have to be strong. We have to be stoic. But I think a lot of time, guys need to share as well how they are doing. So I think
I see these clips on Facebook actually. We'll get into some lizards at some point, right? Allow me.
Yes.
I see these clips on Facebook, and they're always they're mainly in America as well. So you might be able to touch more on this, but there's always these girls and they're like, "Oh, what would you do if a guy cried? Or what would you do if your boyfriend needed help? Or what would you do this?" And obviously they select a minority where the girls are like, "Oh no, I want him to be tough," or "Oh no, you're," because like my other half, Fee, she doesn't really have a lot of choice, but her boyfriend is very open and sad, and sometimes I'm a prick. And she's great. She really is supportive, even when she's not feeling great herself. She is really supportive of me being a crybaby. And for people listening to this on audio, I did inverted commas there. But as a man, if you're a man and you feel like your partner isn't willing to hold a space for you, have you got like any advice, or as a girl or whatever? We don't discriminate, but just in this example, have you got any advice for that person at home that doesn't know how to tell their partner or their significant other that they're struggling? Have you got any advice on how they could go about sort of doing that?
Yes, I think the first part that you touch on is so many girls on surveys do say they want their men to be vulnerable. But many men though reports, when I'm vulnerable, the way you act is as if you do not want me to be vulnerable. So that's something that we do see. It's like we're hearing a girl saying like, hey, I want my men to be more vulnerable. But we're seeing a lot of parents, the way they raise their daughter versus their son is very different. So like parents would tell their son like, hey, do not cry. Hey, get up. But they would say something completely different to their daughter. And the reason I'm studying there is because that we have to address like the root of the issue. It's even when it comes to raising kids, daughters and sons are being raised different. And later in life, although parents were always telling their son to be tough, now we are telling them, hey, you need to be vulnerable. And they're like, well, I've been trying to be vulnerable when I was little. You were telling me not to do it. And now you are telling me to do it. So I think that's one thing when it comes to relationship. It's one, being able to understand the perspective of that person and why they are not being that in the first place. But then second is, I think for guys, we have to start small. If you have a partner and you're not sure whether or not she or he gonna be supportive, try it. And usually if you try it and you realize they weren't supportive, don't just avoid that in the next time. Have a conversation. Like, hey, babe, for this relationship to work, there's going to be some time I'm going to need you to be there for me. And I feel like yesterday you were not there for me. Because I think that's something that happened as well. Sometimes guys or girls try to be vulnerable. The other person were not receptive. Instead of addressing it, we just quash it. Like, okay, they were not vulnerable. I'm never going to do it again. Versus actually having a conversation about, okay, what needs to happen so in this relationship there's a place where both of us can be vulnerable to each other.
I think it's important to note because for example, me and Fee were trying, because there are certain things in our relationship when we try to be vulnerable, but sometimes we butt heads, and we're aware of that. So we have to try and figure out how to get around the headbutting rather than just butt heads and then forget it never happened.
Yes.
And sometimes I forget, sometimes she forgets. Like, we're all human and it's important to forgive each other for that. But we'll say, are you in a place to hold space for me to be vulnerable? And if the other person isn't feeling great, or if the other person isn't, I don't know, knows that they're not going to be receptive, they can go, can it wait until tomorrow, or can it wait until later?
Yes.
Rather than me just go, oh, by the way, today, blah, 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 and she's like, whoa, I'm dealing with all my own stuff. Like, give me 10 minutes to compartmentalize.
Yes.
So I think, just like you say, they're having that initial conversation. And Amy said something up here. So we were saying just off air, Amy, like, because I am quite an open, vulnerable person, obviously the community feels like they can be vulnerable. And I've also learned in my life that for a long time, I expected so much of Fee. I expected her to be my shoulder to cry on, my significant other, like all the other stuff you expect from a partner, my best friend, my reptile friend, my, like, one of the lads. Like, I because I'm not much of a social butterfly, I expected so much from her because I didn't have it anywhere else. And that, since branching out into social media and meeting new people, and now I have my reptile friends, now I have friends that I can be vulnerable with, now I have people that I can talk about certain things with, and I've offloaded a lot of the pressure off Fee, because she's like, I don't want to talk about your lizards, like, I don't want to talk about, I don't know, the boxing or whatever the case may be. So it's trying to find the community you can be part of to fulfill that need and want in your life about all sort of subjects, you know?
Yeah, and you mentioned two things there that's like super important. The first one, timing is important, because if you have an argument with someone and you guys are arguing and all of a sudden you try to be vulnerable, they can view it as it's a tactic that you are using for them to be there for you during an argument. So again, timing is important. If someone is very stressed, they are going through something, and this is when you're trying to be vulnerable, that can be hard, because this might not be the right time. And just because it is not the right time right now, that doesn't mean you cannot address it next time. So I do agree with you asking the other person, like, hey, do you have time for me right now? Do you have time for me to share something? And I think it also works the other way. Sometimes when someone shares something with you, instead of automatically try to help them, it can be good to ask them like, hey, did you just wanted to vent right now, or do you want me to help you fix that issue? Because so many times we jump into helping someone fix issues when they just wanted to vent. But the second thing you've mentioned is not putting all of your eggs in one basket. If you only have one person that you can talk to, it become unhealthy for both sides. One, that means if that person is no longer present for any reason, you now have no one. But that also means that is always the only person you're going to. And sometimes that can be hard on that person because, as you said, they might be going through something well as well. So it's good to have different support system that you can that you can use. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, 100%. And before we go too far, I'm going to try and turn this light off and just see if it helps my face.
Yes.
Probably not. Not that these people care. Wow, let's do a podcast in the dark. That's better. We're just going to go into the quick fire questions.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking about this forever, and we'll just get this bit out of the way. So, it's, also as well, hello, Repti Chat. Thank you for tuning in, my friend. Hope you're well. You've joined at a very vulnerable time, but so it's basically just one or the other. You can elaborate if you want, but they're supposed to just be quick fire. But Tyson from Doc Merton ended up doing the quickfire questions in an hour and a half rather than 5 minutes. So anything can happen. So starting off with snakes or lizards?
Lizards. Although I did like snakes, but my girlfriend does not like snakes, and I had to compromise. And I realized for my family and my goal, it was okay for me to let go of snakes and stay with the reptiles. So reptiles.
I understand why monitors are the thing now, because they're like snake lizards. Money or time?
Time. And the reason I said time, and that's something I want anyone to consider. Imagine you had $1 million and you were about to die, but you could give that $1 million for medicine that would give you life, that would help you live. Would you be okay with keeping your $1 million and dying versus getting that time to continue to live but lose that $1 million? So time.
Yeah. Mentally strong or physically strong?
Mentally strong. The reason for that is because so many people focus on IQ. I think IQ is something people focus on a lot on, and physically being strong. But many research have actually shown that someone that have a stronger EQ, which is emotionally strong, in many situations can outpace someone that is physically strong or someone that have high intelligence. So yes, emotionally strong.
I've had I used to go to the gym quite a lot, and I don't really go anymore. I don't have enough time. But when I got my personal best deadlift, which was like, you guys do pounds, so I don't know what it is, but it was like, let me ask Siri. Hey Siri, what's 20 kg into pounds?
20 kilograms.
Okay, 44 pounds. So it was 44 pounds or 20 kg heavier than my previous personal best. So I just racked on an extra 44 pounds. I tried to lift it, and I failed. And then I put my headphones on, put a song on that takes me back to my dark day. And then I just lifted that thing like it was nothing. It was the maddest thing.
Because with the gym, that's a big thing. Either if you are running or you're lifting weight, it gets to a point where it's no longer about your how physically strong you are. It becomes about like your mental. Because usually we can keep going. Even though our body is telling us we cannot, you can still keep going. But now it's no longer about physical. It's about like mental. So mentally
100%.
strong, 100%. Yes, David Goggins. Someone mentioned Goggins. Yes. Yes, and that's something Goggins always touch on is that, hey, I can keep going, and it's because of being mentally strong. So yes, Goggins.
Yeah, there's again, we're digressing, but welcome to the podcast, everybody. There's a cartoon skit, and it's like Elon Musk, and he's just landed on Mars with like Joe Rogan and a bunch of other people, and they see something in the distance and like, what's that? And it's David Goggins running past, like shirtless, like, I've been here for like 5 days, motherfuckers. I ran here. It was anyway.
That's
back to the questions.
Yes.
Wild caught good, wild caught bad.
Ask that again. And what do you mean by that?
Wild caught, as in like wild caught import reptiles. So
Okay.
captive. So you get obviously captive bred, for example, say tree monitors.
Mhm.
Do you agree with wild caught reptiles coming in? Yes or no?
I believe if a reptile is already in the community, we should do our best not to bring more wild caught if we already have them captive bred.
Mhm.
Now, I do understand in certain situations an animal is not available, but I do most all of my animals except for my savannah are captive bred, but that's because I really prefer captive bred animals. Because so many times there are certain animals when we're taking them, although all animals at one point came from the wild, but I would say I support captive bred. And if an animal is already in being captive bred and there's many of them, getting wild caught just to be sold at a lower price, I personally do not support that.
I'm going to go to this, even though we're digressing. It's my fault these questions aren't going quickly, guys. All right, send hate, I don't care. So, does being physically strong (brackets fitness) help with being mentally strong? So basically, I guess the question is, do you think if you had to start from a foundation, would you rather be unfit and depressed, or no, unfit and then happy and then start to do like become physically strong, or fit and depressed, I guess would be the question. Yeah. So which two would you rather be?
So I would again start with mentally strong, and I do agree with Serpentine that they do go hand in hand, just as physical, mental, yes, 100%. But to go to the gym, oftentimes you need motivation. You need like that motivation to get up. Oftentimes, if you're dealing with depression, sometimes you're feeling fatigue, you have no energy, you cannot even get to the gym. So although physically strong, mentally strong, yes, 100% goes hand in hand, it does start with the mental.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would rather be mentally strong over physically strong. Like my body, I've gained a lot of weight over the last couple of years, and I think I've got stronger, as in physically stronger, because I was very, very skinny. But I've gained a lot of weight, and I'm very unhappy with my body. But because my brain is stubborn, even though it's always sad, it's quite stubborn. I can make myself do stuff. So I think for me as well, I'd rather have the mentally strong to then have the strength and the resilience to keep coming back and back and back to the gym, even though I went for a year and then gave up because I just didn't have enough time. But anyway, where were we? Okay, snake racks. Are you for or are you against snake racks?
I would say I have no opinion on this because I have not kept snakes as long, and I've never kept snakes in snake racks. So I think if I was a snake keeper and I had more experience, I would have been able to give like a better answer to that. But I think as of now, I know for my monitors, I keep all of them in like at least 4x2x2 cages. But I would say no opinion on that due to lack of experience with snakes.
That's fair enough. Arid species or tropical species? So as a general, not just monitored. Arid's done. There you go.
Yes, arid species. Yes.
Okay, this is the part where every podcast, my girlfriend Fee, she picks two random animals for you to choose between. So for yourself today, she has chosen wolves, wolf, or camels.
Wolves, for sure. Yes.
There you go. Big reptiles or small reptiles?
Big reptiles. Although I am a big supporter of small reptiles. Because when I started keeping reptiles, I already knew I wanted big reptiles. But because I was living in an apartment and because of where I was financially, I understood that I could not start with big reptiles. So I did start with like the dwarf monitors because small reptiles are cheaper, when it comes to feeding, husbandry, all of that, it's less money. So I would suggest anyone that's getting started to start with small, but big reptiles for sure.
And then onto that, big monitors or dwarf monitors? Doesn't have to
Big,
be as captive. It's just what you prefer.
yes. I prefer big monitors, and I think part of that is because I love the wow factor. So this is very selfish of me, but I do love the wow. Because when someone come and they see my small monitors, it's like, oh, that's cute. What is this? But
Yeah,
when they see like my black throat, it is very different. And I love that. So I would choose big monitors, although I have kept small monitors longer and I do have more experience with small monitors. And I would definitely suggest small monitors to other people rather than big monitors.
I agree. Would you rather be Instagram famous or YouTube famous?
Mm. I would say that is that is a good question. I've never thought of it. Um, I would want to know if there's more people on Instagram or more people on YouTube.
I
And
think there's more people using YouTube. I think because YouTube's like the second biggest search engine now. I
okay,
think so. I think
so then
YouTube is
okay,
definitely
so then
bigger. Yeah,
I would choose I would choose YouTube for that because then I'll be able to reach more people.
that's fair comment. Okay, I don't have the prop with me today, but we're talking about the shoes, Crocs. Are you pro Croc? Are you no Croc?
I've never had a clock, although I love seeing people wearing them, especially now you can add all of those different gadgets to them.
Yeah. I've got custom pulse
So
monitors ones because I'm a
yes,
nerd.
yes. So they
Yeah.
are super cool, and I've heard they are very comfy. It's just that I've never wore one or have one.
We're not going to give too much attention to this because I don't know what's happening in chat, but I just want to know how camel meat tastes is what's going on in chat right now. But anyway,
Well, you need to find out, then just let us know.
I don't know what's going on with them. Okay, do you prefer your animals? This is your pet animals. Do you prefer them to be feisty or tame?
Ooh. When I kept with my small monitors, I've always had some that I did not work with them because I wanted them to be as they would be. But I would say personally, I do prefer my reptiles to be tame, my animals to be tame. But at the same time, I do find joy in keeping a reptile that I just keep in an enclosure and I feed and make sure their husbandry is good, but I do not handle them. I do like I used to have like it was a small dwarf monitor, and his name was Mbaku. And
Okay.
Mbaku was feisty. He would grab his food and oh my god. But yes, so I would say 10, 100%.
Do you prefer wild types or morphs?
I would say wild types. Although when I look at snakes, if I were to keep snakes, it would have been morph. But when it comes to monitors, wild type.
And then the final question, in your opinion, what is the best pet monitor?
Ooh, best pet monitor. So this one gonna be very biased because I'm answering it from what I have kept. And so far, I have kept Aki, Pilbara, Varanus tristis, Kimberly, and there's another dwarf I kept. I keep forgetting the name, but I would go with the Akis. I think Akis for me have been like the best pet monitor, not just in terms of husbandry and things like that, but even when you make like mistakes with them, you're more likely to get it back. Like if you were working with an Aki and something happened, it's easier to continue compared to some other monitors. So I know that's the thing. People always mention Aki, but I do think there's a reason they mention Akis, and it's because they are really great pet monitors.
Yeah, I agree. I have Akis here. I think Akis are incredible. Like you say, they're a bit more resilient than
Yes.
other species. I think for me personally, and obviously this question is just based on opinions, but for me personally, I think Gill and I are better than Aki's, the little Mulga monitors.
Yes.
They're hardier than Aki's. They're less likely to have fallen off toes, stuck shed. They don't need as much humidity. They're smaller. You can do more with them. So I think your Dacia complex is for the better. But on that, what is the species that you're currently keeping? You listed some Dacia there, but what I know you've got a few other bits and bobs. What species are you working with at the moment?
So as of right now, I have a black dragon. I have a blue-tongue skink. I have a Varanus tristis. I have a Kimberly walk monitor. I have an Aki. I have a Savannah monitor, and I have a black throat. Yeah, I have a black throat.
Okay, because I remember stumbling across your page probably a year or so ago now. Actually, probably more so. And your bio was something along the lines of wanting every Audatria.
Yes.
And you seem to have developed some bigger monitors there. So what's changed?
Yes, I've kept, and there were some other dwarf I've kept that I no longer have, because I used to have a Pilbara monitor, so I've had one of those, and I had both yellow and red Aki, and I've had another. Give me a second. I've had a dwarf monitor that is called. I keep forgetting the name.
It wasn't a Gilleneye, was it?
No, it was. Give me 1 second, because I really want.
No stress. That is, yeah. I'm trying to think. Cause I had a flick through your page because I know you've had Kim's, you've had.
And this was one of my. Okay, there it is. So he was Mbaku. What was Mbaku? Mbaku was Storai. Yes, Varanus Storai. Yes, I had kept a Varanus Storai. But to answer your question directly, I think what has changed is just that one, I've realized I did not want to have as many monitors as I first wanted. Because for me to keep all of the Audatrias would have meant I would have had 6, 8, 10 different monitors, and I was keeping all of the small ones in 4x2x2, and I would have increased my Kimberly as an adult. I want them to be in a 4x2x4, and my Varanus tristis, I want them to move to a 4x2x4. So just when I end up thinking of place, I'm like, oh, I don't think that's the direction I want to go anymore. Instead, I still want to keep some dwarf monitors, 1 or 2, and I want to keep 2 big ones. So that way, if someone comes, because one of my goals is I want when people come to my place for them to be able to see monitors and learn about them, just as if someone goes to someone's place and they have fish. I think it's easy. It's a big thing when it comes to aquarium. There's a certain perspective people have about people that have aquarium, but it is very different about like reptiles. And one of my goals was to change that. So I think that's what has changed, is that I've decided like, I don't think that's the goal for me anymore. Instead, let me change it to that, because especially as what I'm in life, it better serves me, and it's better for me, and as well as for the animals as well.
So what choices did you make to lead you on to the Black Dragon and the Black Throat? Why those? Why not normal Asian water monitor? Why not I don't know, a mangrove monitor?
Yes, that's true. I think one, I've watched many shows, many YouTubers going over like Asian water monitor. So I knew I wanted like an Asian water monitor. But the reason as to why like a Black Dragon, it's because one, I love them more, and two, again, part of my goal is to tell people about monitors as well. I think it's one that's more eye captivating. Is seeing like an animal that's all black.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. The Black Throat, I recently got the Black Throat, and one of the reasons I got the Black Throat is I wanted a monitor that's from, of course, I already have the savannah that's from Africa, but I wanted another animal that's from Africa. So I think that was like one of the goals for me. Is like, hey, I'm African American, Haitian African American, but I'm like, I wanted a monitors that's from the motherland. So I went with black throat for that reason.
I wish I could say that. We have like 6 native species of reptiles, and none of the biggest lizard is like this big. I mean, we have legless lizards here called slow worms, which are bigger, but the true lizards are like this big. They're still cool, but they're not a big Gularis cool. But yeah, so we have a little savannah monitor here.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. I've messed around with white throats. I've seen black throats in person, but I've never had the opportunity to work with black throats. But I've been told they're incredible. You say you've only recently got yours. How are you finding the black throat?
So the black throat, and I think that's something maybe you can relate with as well, is sometimes you see someone selling a reptile and you're like, this is too good to be true.
Yeah.
So I pretty much was on Instagram and I saw my friend Max had like a baby black throat, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get like a black throat, and he's like, hey, you should reach out to that person, and I'm like, sounds good. So I reached to that person, and they told me they had like an adult black throat that they were selling, and when I asked for the price, it was really cheap. I'm talking, since your YouTube is about being vulnerable, it was below 1,300.
I don't know what the market value for a black throat in America is.
And that was like a big guy. And that was with shipping included. So shipping like a 5 feet, 6 feet animal.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, sounds good. Let's do this. And I was telling him, let's do this. I was watching his Instagram and I'm like, okay, I already know Max and I'm on that person's YouTube. I'm watching everything and I can see that they have a lot of animals. I can see the people that they follow. So I did all of my homework, but I was still waiting for the animal to come to make sure like, oh my God, this is true. So that's how I end up getting like the black throat. And right now he is in like 14 feet by 8 feet by 5 feet enclosure. So I know I'm saying feet, so I'm not sure the measurement.
Feet's fine. Feet's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, so he is housed in like a big enclosure. But what about you? What are like your favorite big monitors right now?
So my biggest monitor that I own currently is my mangrove, but she's not very big. She's like 2.5 foot. I have a peach throat, which will probably get bigger. And my savannah is probably about 2 foot to the nose. She's probably 2 foot. I like the Indicus complex, so I like stuff like the peach throat monitors, the quince monitors, the mangroves, obviously. I think my longest lizard actually is my green tree because he's just shy of 3 foot. But my mangrove is bigger. Okay. I because I know in America, because I believe you're Florida, aren't you?
Yeah, Florida.
Are you keeping outdoors?
My black throat, yes.
Okay.
He is under a patio, so but yes, he would be views as outdoors. Yes.
Yeah. So we have. Let me convert it for the Americans. Hey Siri, what's minus 10 degrees Celsius into Fahrenheit?
Minus 10 degrees Celsius.
So we have. In the start of this year, we had a cold snap come through, which is colder than normal, but it was a cold snap, and it was 14 degrees Fahrenheit for like 2 weeks. So our climate is only hot enough for maybe like 5 days of the year to keep a monitor outside.
Oh, okay.
And the UK is a very small country with a lot of people, so we cram houses in, so all the houses are tiny. So we don't have the big fancy double garages that Americans have, or the big rooms. So for me to keep a true big monitor, I find it quite hard where to put it. Like I have a very big reptile room. My reptile room's 28 feet long by 14 foot wide. 14 foot wide, and it goes like really tall. Like it's a pitch roof. So I'm very lucky I have a big reptile room. but then I also have a lot of reptiles, so it's hard for me to like know exactly what I can and can't fit into the spacing. But if I was to have someone said to me like I have one big monitor and that's all you can have, and it's one I can obtain, it probably would be a black throat. I'm not a massive fan of Asian water monitors. I don't dislike them. I just they're not even in my top 10. But I do really like black throats.
Yes.
I just know I couldn't do one justice because I would want it in like you say something yourself, a 14-foot long sort of massive enclosure. Like my Savannah monitor, she's 2 foot tip of nose to tip of tail, so she's 24 inches and she's in an 8 foot long by 3 foot by 3 foot enclosure, and that's
nice.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Like I'm quite big on space. I love giving lots of space.
Yes.
And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say, oh, it's a nice enclosure for her. She was recently upgraded into it maybe a month, 6 weeks ago.
Okay.
But I wouldn't want her to be much bigger in that enclosure. So because she's quite small, I'm like, oh, this is cool because she's in this big enclosure.
Yes.
Because as I'm getting more into reptile keeping, I'm realizing that smaller animals, you can do so much. For example, I have a bearded dragon here, and if my bearded dragon was in that 8x3x3, it would be a palace.
Yes.
But for my Savannah, it's just okay. Like, it's good. It's not bad. It's just okay. And I'm trying to get away from it's just okay. I want everything to be a palace, but obviously practicality comes into it, and I can't house everything in an 8x3x3 with the number of animals that I have. So for me, big monitors are more of a hindrance. But that being said, I have quite a few mangrove monitors, which are quite big monitors, and I am going to potentially look to breed peach throats one day. But then I also have tiny little geckos. So I have kind of these geckos that are as big as your baby finger as adults. So the June geckos. Diane from Reptile has done a good video on them. But the tiny little June geckos, so they're as big as your finger. Then I have monitors that are going to get 4 foot. So I kind of have a flavor of everything.
It sounds like that, yes.
Yeah, and I get more pleasure from the small ones because you can put them in, for example, a 4 foot long, 4 foot tall, 2 foot deep for something like an Aki or a Kimberley. That's a good enclosure. Like, it's a good, but like I say, if you put your Storai in there or your Gillanai in there, then that's a palace.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I'm trying to get. And I hold myself really accountable for these animals because I have these animals' lives in my hands.
That's true.
I feel like I need to do them justice, and sometimes I forget that it doesn't have to be done overnight, and then I end up in this visceral circle of being like, people that have followed me for a while will know, but I'm like, I'm a shit keeper. These animals deserve better. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm doing a good job. Oh my god, everything's gone to shit, and then I end up in these never-ending circles of like turmoil. And it all stems from like a good place of wanting to be a good keeper for these animals. But the more I keep bringing it back to the answering the question, but the more I keep bigger animals, the guiltier I feel. So I'm slowly trying to drift into less big animals, more medium to small animals.
And so one thing you've mentioned there, which is good to address since we're connecting that to mental health, is that sometimes it has nothing to do with the cage, but rather with you. Like if someone is feeling like, oh my God, I'm not a good person, then they might also say, the way I'm keeping my animals, since I'm not a good person, is not good. So therefore I have to change it. And maybe once I change it, then I'm going to be a good person.
Yeah. 100%.
So they are looking at changing exterior things as if it is going to change the self. So I think, again, there can be a fine line there to like, one, yes, you want to keep your animals as they should be kept. But sometimes, if we're dealing with intrusive thoughts or self-esteem and self-image, we might view everything around us as a reflection of that. And sometimes we go above and beyond to change, thinking, okay, once everything is changed, I'm gonna feel better. But sometimes that's not always the case. But I do agree being able to give animals like a palace, because those animals were living in the wild in like so much space, and we're like, oh, they're gonna be okay in a 2x2x2. Like, oh, is that true? And I think for the people that might not be able to give their animals as much space right now, one thing you can do is give them vertical, not just horizontal space, but vertical space. So you can put like backgrounds throughout the enclosure. So now they are not just using the bottom, they're also using the wall of the enclosure. So that's something to keep in mind. So
yeah, 100%. I have a couple of so again, people that watch regularly the Monitor Dreams, Matt and Michael, they'll happy birthday, Michael, but they'll know that I and do you know what? It's probably so true, because I beat myself up because of my shit and my traumas and my issues, and I probably am a control freak with my reptiles, because I've never thought about this, but I and I'm sure other people can relate to this, but I probably am such an anal perfectionist keeper, high standard keeper, because it's something I can control.
Yes.
And I didn't know where this podcast was going to go, but welcome to the show, everybody. That's really interesting, because I probably, it's probably more a reflection of myself and a remembrance of how I don't like myself and I don't like my life when I see an animal in a smaller enclosure, rather than the animals in the smaller enclosure. And like we spoke about off air, that's that de-weeding process. Whereas you assume buying a new animal, upgrading an animal is going to fix your life, when in fact it just gives you 10 minutes of fleeting bliss. So yeah, that's actually really interesting, because I'd never thought about that. And I like to class myself as quite an introspective person, because I sit with myself and I think about these things and think about why am I thinking this, and why am I doing this, and why am I acting the way that I'm acting, to try and find those roots to rip out. And yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because I generally never thought of that before. So I'm sure other people are watching this now, will listen to this and go, fucking hell, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and for most people, one way to know this is that, it's to look at patterns. And I think that's what becomes very beneficial, because if you are someone that just upgrade your reptile, that might not be anything. But if there's a pattern, if you can catch yourself and reflect and see, oh, there's a pattern of I'm always upgrading my reptiles, but I'm also realizing the time when I'm always upgrading, there's something else going in my life. Then that help you see, because you really have to take some time to reflect on it and be mindful to realize, oh, this is something I'm doing. Whenever this is happening in my life, I do this. Whenever this is happening, I do this. And that really help you see, oh, because maybe you were upgrading because, yes, the animal needs something better and they got big, 100%. But there can also be a fine line that you were upgrading, not for the animal, for yourself. And
literally, sorry, carry on. I was going to say, today,
yes.
I just upgraded 4 animals today because I was sad.
Yeah, that would be an example. Yes. And another thing that can help with that as well is, because there can be positive and negative on both sides. So if you now, whenever something is happening, you are changing your reptiles, although you view it as good, it could also mean you're spending more money.
It's just a coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism.
It's the same as drinking, yeah.
Yeah. So because you might not view it as, oh, this is not as bad as anything else. But again, as you start continuing to do it, then you realize, oh, it's taking me a lot of time. I'm spending money. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So in 1 year, it might not be anything, but over a 5-year period of you doing the same thing, all of a sudden, it does accumulate. So I think it's good just to keep in mind on like, hey, am I doing this because that's what the animal deserve, so I have to do it? But is this like a projection of myself? So that would be something I would suggest everybody to keep in mind.
I'm just going to go to the comments because there was a couple before
Mhm.
we slip onto something else. Bigger is better. Sometimes it's hard to do, but as long as there's progress towards it and you're doing the best you can in the circumstances, it doesn't. Yeah, 100%. As long as you're progressing every day slowly towards benefiting your animal's lives, like, I'm all for it.
Yes.
I agree totally. I look at an enclosure such as my geckos and it looks beautiful, but when you put in the context, I'll spend over 99% of its life in there, and you begin to feel stressed. Yeah, it's I've made a reel. I haven't posted it yet. And it's about the reel is basically about these moments that these animals give me, like these moments of bliss that these animals give me to allow me to escape reality. And regardless if that is me upgrading them to use them as a crutch, or if that's just me observing their behaviors in these enclosures that I've built for them. And I was sitting and I was thinking about it today as I was writing this reel out. And I thought to myself, like, where would I be if I didn't have reptiles? Like, if I just had like one, or if I just didn't have reptiles? And I didn't come up with the answer. Because I feel, for me personally, and I know a couple of close friends feel this way too. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever found this in your keeping, but sometimes keeping becomes more of a stress than a blessing, or because obviously it's a privilege to keep these animals, and sometimes keeping can become a negative, and it can overwhelm and consume you, and it's all that there is oh fucking hell, these animals need this and these animals need that, and I have to feed and I have to water and I have to clean, and I just don't want to do this and I don't have to do that. So I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that.
I think one thing I want to touch with that is, again, so going back to the root of the issue, I think proper keeping, with anything in life, there's going to be some stress and there's going to be some positive. But with proper keeping, with a thoughtful keeping, we do see less stress and more positive times. And let me use dog as an example. If I were to get a Rottweiler and I only live in a 300 square feet and I'm not going to be home at all, then I'm going to experience more stress because this animal requires such a high level of maintenance that I'm unable to give them. So yes, there's going to be a high amount of stress, but it's because of the thoughtful and proper keeping in the first place. Which means if I had got an animal that was more fitting to me, stress is still going to be present 100%, but it would not have been as much. So I think that's something we're going to see with anything you keep, not just animals, even with your job. There's going to be stress, there's going to be positive. In everything, there's going to be stress, and there's going to be positive. But I do see that whenever we're keeping things that we are unable to keep, we're keeping too many that we are not fit to keep at the moment. Again, this is very, it does change, because today maybe I can keep one, tomorrow I can keep 5. So it's not really has to do with the amount, but it has to do with the balance of where you're at and what you're keeping. So yes, I think stress might be present, but I do feel like there can be that balance. And it all starts with, hey, I'm going to keep this. Am I able to keep them knowing that they live 22 years? What is my backup plan? Do I have all of those ingredients that are necessary? So I think being proactive can help with the stress part. What do you think?
I don't know how immersed you are personally in like the reptile hobby itself. I'm trying to get away from it personally, but you see time and time and time and time and time again, people go from one leopard gecko to 60 animals, and it happens. It's a snowball. Like we all,
Yeah.
I've been there, you know, we've all done it. Everyone's done it. This is cool. That's cool. This, oh my God, look at that. I didn't even know this existed. Oh, I can keep that, blah, 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 blah. And again, I feel like this could be a common theme of this podcast, but the feeling of buying a new animal, it is called the hedonic treadmill, isn't it? When you get the
Yes.
peaks of happiness. So for people that don't know, I'm not too versed in it myself, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But there's a thing called the hedonic treadmill, and there's basically everyone has a baseline of, let's just call it happiness for the sake of the story. Everyone has a baseline of happiness, and when you get a new car, you get a promotion, you go on a date, you buy a new reptile, you peak, and your hedonic treadmill, you go uphill, and your endorphins, you rise, and you're all happy, and everyone's loving life. And eventually, the new car, the new reptile, the new job, whatever becomes the reptile, the job, the car. And your hedonic treadmill goes back to your baseline, and something else will happen in your peak. And also, obviously, you can have the flip side. You could lose your job, an animal could pass away. You could have a breakup, so you drop, and eventually you heal and you move on and you go back to your baseline. And I, for a long time in my earlier days of my mental health journey, I was in my teenage years, in my early 20s, I was chasing peaks. So I'd pick up new hobbies, I would pick up new animals, I would pick up new friends, and I was undiagnosed at the time in regards to ADHD, and the two sort of go hand in hand. But I was trying stuff, and I was chasing spikes. And nowadays, I'm kind of realizing that I need to raise my bar rather than raise my spikes. And I feel a lot of people. I was talking to a lady as well that I talk to quite regularly, and she'll be listening to this now. She'll be like, "Oh, it's me. You know who you are." And she was reading a study recently, and there is almost like a, I don't want to say a gene, but almost like a personality trait for like a nature nurture kind of person, normally in women, and they feel the need to like rescue these animals, and they have this innate behavior to nurture these animals and rescue these animals. And again, I believe it's a reflection on self, and it's probably a trauma that we've put in our back pocket of not being loved or not being wanted as a kid, or something similar, being rejected by the boy or the girl at school or whatever the case is. And you feel like you need to rescue these animals to give yourself validation and make yourself feel better. And almost lick the wounds that you don't even know. You might know that you have, but probably most of us are carrying these scars and we don't even know that they're visible. And we're using animals as crutches to almost allow us to mull through life, because we're almost got blinkers on and we're just walking blindly into new animal, and we're throwing them all behind us. And before you know it, and obviously this is an extreme case, but and I think we're all capable of getting to this place, so I feel like it's important to talk about. But before you know it, you've acquired these 60 animals that none of which fit in your room, and you can't care for them properly, and you've just lost your job. And all of a sudden you have 60 mouths to depend on you. And when obviously life happens, but you've put yourself in this volatile position through... I don't know how to word it. You put yourself in this volatile position for not understanding your emotions, maybe. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but I don't know how we stop this epidemic of people using reptiles as plasters. I don't know. And I'm not expecting you to have the answer. It's just an open conversation. But I've spoken to quite a few people, and I'm talking probably hundreds that have experienced this. So there's definitely more, because I've only talked to a very small percentage of reptile keepers, and they all chase the high and those endorphins of these new reptiles. But I don't have the answers, and it's more of a statement. But
I think so. This is something that is present not just in the reptile community, but in the world in general. And it has to do, I think one thing you guys gonna continue, I'm gonna continue repeating, is addressing the root of the issue rather versus the leaves. I think so many times we grab the leaves, we're like, okay, it's gonna be fixed. But because of the root of the issue is not addressed, it's still gonna be present. If there's an apple tree and I went and grabbed all of those apples, guess what's gonna happen in 3 to 6 months? It's gonna produce more apple because the apple tree is still present. So many people define happiness as something that is external. Whenever you define something as something that is external, you then need external things to bring happiness, right? But if you were to think like, hey, happiness is something within, then when I get reptiles, yes, it does make me happy, but I do not find happiness in that. But if you are someone that find happiness in getting reptile, then whenever you get sad, you're gonna want to get another reptiles. So I think first it has to do with us being able to address, hey, where do I find validation? Same thing, we see that a lot as well, where people, when you view validation in other people, you now depend on people to validate you. And when people do not validate you, you feel lower. But if validation came from within, when people validate you, yes, I mean, you still love it, but you do not expect it because that's no longer where you find validation. So I think that is the first thing that needs to be addressed before we can even address the second question is, where do I find happiness? Where do I find a validation? Where do I find wealth? How do I define those things? And being able to define it in the first place. Because once it is defined, it becomes easier to view like, hey, yes, I can get 5 reptiles, but that's because I want to and I can care for them. Because there's nothing with the reptile you're getting. It's whether or not you're getting them for the right reason. Because what happened is someone that get reptiles for happiness, when they start getting too much, they start getting stressed, and that increase their mental health issues.
Yeah.
And then they have to get more. So we have that cycle. And again, it doesn't just happen in the reptile industry. It happens everywhere. If someone get a car for happiness, once they start driving it, after a couple months, guess what? They need another car. If someone needs clothes, as they mentioned, it helps you now, but you're going to keep getting it. Versus if you were to address the root of the issue, and that would help long term. So I think that's what I would say is being able to address the root of the issue.
It's like you say because I'm just thinking for someone listening to this, because I can only speak for me, but I know, like I say, in my teens and my early 20s, I didn't realize I had issues. I just thought this is my life. This is me. This is, I didn't know I was chasing. Like, it's experience based. You buy a reptile, wow, I feel great. That's all the brain remembers, that buying a reptile feels great. A equals B, great. But actually it's not A equals B, it's A plus B is C less a D. But I didn't know that. So I'm just thinking aloud now. For people listening, thinking to stuff, is that me? I guess, like we said earlier, I guess the pattern recognition, like if you're buying a reptile purely because you're sad, if you're buying anything or you're chasing anything purely because you need it rather than like you want it. Like, for example, I'll be completely honest, I was today quite sad, so I went to the reptile shop and I was like, I'm going to buy a reptile. I didn't buy a reptile because I've gotten better at, because I like to class my brain and me as two different people, and they have conversations, and there's a really weird juxtaposition that goes on in my head. And my brain's like, yeah, we're sad, buy a reptile, that'll cheer you up. And then my body goes, yeah, that's right. And then on the way to the reptile shop, it gives me that time to have these thoughts. And I'm like, you don't want a fucking new reptile, you're just sad. And then it's like, no. And then I have these conversations with myself, and then I didn't buy the new reptile. But then I did come home and tinker around, and it didn't cost me any money, admittedly. It's all stuff that I have here, but it very much is a crutch that even I wasn't aware of. And I say even I, because I like to think of myself as quite a self-aware person. And I was blissfully unaware that this is clearly a coping mechanism, but it clearly is now that you've said it. And it's been...
And the brain, the brain is very smart. Our brain is very smart. And I think oftentimes people do not fully understand what is the brain's responsibility. One of the main responsibility of your brain is to keep you alive. Your brain cares about surviving, which is why for anxiety, sometimes your brain's always letting you know, oh, there might be something over there. There might be something over there. It's because if your brain tell you there is something over there and 99% of the time there's nothing, that 1% when there is, your brain just help you survive. And your brain is okay with putting you to that misery for that 1%, because your
Because it
brain
knows you're
care
going to
about
survive. Yeah.
Yes, your brain help you with survive. So if your brain knows, oh, hey, you buying animal is gonna help you for 10 minutes, then your brain is okay with that, because for 10 minutes it does help you. So I think that's something as well to keep in mind, is our brain wants us to survive, or not to thrive, which means you might be in a position where you are depressed, but at least you are still alive, and your brain wants that. So, which is why people that deal with a substance misuse, your brain really make you think, hey, if you were to do this, it's gonna help you.
Yeah.
And you go ahead and you do it, and it help you for a second, then it doesn't help you anymore. But your brain can be very tricky. Your brain can lie to you. So I think being able to remember, like, our brain can lie to us. Like in your situation, your brain was like, hey, go get that animal. And if you had went and got the animal and you felt good, guess what happened? Now you have evidence to support, oh, my brain was right. So then you continue to do it. Every time you do it, it gives you evidence. But if you went and you did not do it and later you felt better, then you realize, oh, my brain was lying to me. I do not need to get an animal to feel better. And as that continue, you now continue to gain evidence against what your brain is telling you. So, but yes, the brain is tricky.
Yeah, well, this is it, because I'm in a position in my journey, because everybody's at a different place, and that's okay. But I'm in a position in my journey that I know 20 minutes after buying that new animal, I'm going to feel miserable, because I now know that that was the wrong decision. And like you say, the brain, I'm fully aware. I'm very thankful that I'm aware that my brain's job is to keep me alive at a primitive level. You know, when we were living in caves and we're like, okay, there's saber-tooth's going to come in, or a bear's going to come in, like there's a shadow, there's this, and your brain's designed to be like, we're safe, we're not safe. But now our brains can't process all this different material. It's not had enough time. Technology and society has evolved so much faster than the brain.
Exactly. Yes.
So all these thoughts and feelings swirl around, and your brain latches onto one that seems like a good idea. For example, buy the new Reptile. And then it holds on to that, and that's all it keeps pressing to the front of your mind, and you believe it to be so. So it's hard to know. I think someone, who was it that just said it? I think it was Serpentine. Where you at, Serpentine? There. So this isn't a bad idea. So if you have another hobby, so you can impulse buy for them, because at the end of the day, if we're keeping this to do with reptiles, the problem is with impulse buying reptiles is obviously they're a sentient being that is now relying on you, rather than buying, I don't know, a bloody Pokemon card or some ornaments or whatever. Okay, my bank balance has taken a hit, but it sits on the shelf. That is what it is. Well, at least if you're buying something that's not depending on you literally financially and for life, then you can get to a place where you can kind of use that as a crutch, rather than the buying of the reptiles as a crutch, and then start to work on your mental health. Because obviously I know firsthand it doesn't change overnight. I'm fully aware that all of these things that we're discussing, I'm fully aware of them. I know exactly the patterns of my brain, but it doesn't always come to fruition until it's too late. So it's just trying to find the pattern recognition in your life, why you do what you do, and then trying to find that route. And sometimes, like when I did therapy, my therapist, she is quite a spiritual lady, and we did some like meditative stuff, and I've never really done any like meditation. And I've never been against meditation, but I guess my ignorance to the world, I assumed meditation would be like namaste, whereas it's not. It's just a case of sitting with yourself and seeing what comes up.
Yes.
But stigma, society, uneducation, I didn't know that until obviously I did it. And she was like, do you want to meditate? I was like, what the fuck are you on about? she's like, let's just do some meditation. And I'm like, what? Anyway, we started doing meditation, and we were doing this guided meditation, and how can I explain it? So she was basically talking me through, people that have done meditation will understand, but she was talking me through, she was like, I was sitting on myself, I was in this place of like calmness and consciousness, and I was sitting there, and she was like, let's feel the toes, see if there's any trauma in the toes, going up through the shins, if there's any trauma in the shins, and we're going through all my different body parts, and I assume chakras, but I'm not that far into spirituality. But anyway, it gets to the throat, and the throat chakra can become quite inflamed and stuff like that, for at least from what I understand, if there's hidden trauma in regards to like stories, lies, whispers, that sort of stuff. If you're keeping secrets, like your chakra can become blocked. Anyway, so she's like, oh, are you feeling anything anyway? So I've got like an itch in my throat, and we were working through it, and she's like talking me through, and she's like, I can't remember what she was saying exactly, but we were like doing tapping motions, and she was like, even though this feeling, I truly love and accept myself, and we're doing stuff like that, and all of a sudden, like my throat starts getting like tight, feeling like I'm being strangled, and it's this weirdest sensation, and this voice out of nowhere in my head is like, no, and I just started like suffocating and had to stop, and then I had to work through the point of the story. So I had to work through what had caused this, and I'm not going to share publicly on the podcast what had caused this situation, but I had to go back to some trauma from when I was a kid that I kept secret, that I completely forgot about, that was being suppressed in my bloody throat chakra. Anyway, so therapy is like a daunting thing, and these stories of my past had come back, and I had to try and reread these books that I'd forgotten about, and then close them again to then move on to start a new chapter. And yeah, it's scary, man. Like, it's real scary. I'm not going to sit here and try and front. Like, therapy was the best and hardest thing that I ever did, and I'd recommend it to anybody.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's important, because many times people think like therapy gonna be fun. Therapy is usually not fun, because you're addressing things you did not want to address.
Yeah, and you cry a lot.
So one thing Serpentine mentioned on like, hey, going from one to another, I think that's something we see a lot, where people would move from one thing to another, but it's still not addressing the issue, because you are still trying to buy material things or animals to replace something else. And until you address what's causing it in the first place, that might be an issue. Because some people buy a ton of flowers because that's what they love. So there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are someone that's buying it to fulfill like an internal thing, that is when it's become an issue. So it is not an issue to get a ton of animals if you are fully understanding why you're getting them and you're able to care for them. That's okay. But if you are someone that's getting those animals to fulfill an internal things, an internal emotion, something you're dealing with, it become an issue. One thing Paul mentioned earlier, it's about people saving. There's people that really always try to save animals because they're like, oh my God, let me save this animal. Let me save this animal. I always would suggest that you ask yourself why. It's always a good question. Ask yourself why. Because there might be no reason. You might be someone that, yes, you just want to save animals and you can. But there might be a why behind it. There might be something that happened that caused you now to be in a place where you feel like you have to save those animals, and saving them help you in some way. And that is when it becomes an issue, because now you are reliant on that. You have to do this to get that, versus someone that's just doing it because, hey, that's something I love. So asking why. So that would be something, and that goes for everything. Like, why am I doing this? Is there any pattern? What do I gain from this? So again, as you were mentioning with meditation, it can be just that. And remember, you don't have to sit a certain way to do meditation. You can be walking and you start asking yourself those, why am I doing this? What do I gain from this? Where is this going? Like, asking yourself those questions can really help you get in touch with yourself. One thing we saw during COVID is a lot of people mental health went up And the reason it went up, it's because people were no longer working, people were sitting at home, and people had time to be with themselves. People could no longer hide their feelings in working. They could no longer hide their feeling in hobbies, in being out, going out. They really had to be home and dealing with everything. And during that time, we saw a spike in mental health. And that was because of that. So I guess the key thing here is not running away from any issues that you might be feeling or dealing with, because regardless if you're getting more reptiles, you're getting cars, you're getting clothes, it only helping short term. It's gonna help you for one day, it's gonna help you for 1 month. But just like the apple tree, that if you took the apples out, the tree still gonna produce more apples. It's that same thing here. So I think meditation as a form of connecting with yourself and asking yourself those why questions, or even going to therapy, I think that's something that can be very helpful. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Like, I remember, we're gonna get a bit deep now, but I don't really care. I remember, like, so this is for people listening. It's going to be mainly just mental health rather than a bit of reptiles now. But I remember, so in 2020, start of 2020, end of 2019, start of 2020, I probably experienced depression, like true depression for the first time. I'd experienced like ups and downs and fleeting moments throughout my life, but I believe now those were ADHD symptoms of like emotional imbalances and bits and bobs. But I knew, looking back on now in hindsight, I felt nothing when I was depressed. Like, I felt nothing. I wasn't sad. I wasn't happy. I wasn't angry. I just felt nothing. And at first it's almost quite nice to be numb, and it's like, oh, this is all right, this is a break. And then you go from being numb to just number and number and number. And that, I was at the point where I was generally like, I was waking up in the morning and I was crying myself to work, wiping my tears and stuff, and then I was going like, all right, guys, whack on to work, yeah, bar, electrician, hammer, clip, yeah, everyone's happy. And then I would cry myself home. I'd moved back in with my parents at the time, and I'd be like, oh, you're right, mum, this, that, and the other. She's like, yeah, this, that. Then I'd go to my room and I would just cry until I went to sleep. And I did this for 8 months, maybe, like every day. No one knew. And I just was in that visceral like pit, and I didn't believe there was anything wrong with me. It was only like after 6 to 8 months of this, I couldn't really hide it anymore, and people around me were like, well, what's wrong? What's up? What's wrong? And then, because I felt like that was an attack on me, because I felt like a failure that I was so down or sad, I started to get angry with the people around me, because I was like, what do you mean? Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. And I started to like project. And then, long story short, my brain was like I didn't, and I never in my life ever have wanted to die. I've just wanted the pain to stop. And I think there's a massive dissociation with people that attempt and have sadly succeeded in suicide. I think a lot of the stigma of, oh, it's the coward's way out. And
that's not true at all.
No, it's definitely not true. And I've said to people in person, have you ever been there? Have you ever experienced what they may have been going through? And if they say yes, I said, well, you're a fucking insensitive. I'm going to swear, fuck it, you're an insensitive cunt. And if they say no, I said, well, don't fucking butt your nose in where you don't understand. And that was when I was angry. Now I'm more of a compassionate person. I say, I just go, well, I was there. And am I a coward? Like, now I'm standing in front of you face to face. Am I the coward? And I didn't want to die. I would have just given anything for the suffering to stop. And my brain, being a brick, was like, the only way out is death. That's it. You can't escape. And when your brain, who you assume is your life support and, you know, everything, your brain says to you this enough times, you believe it to be true. And July 2020, I was a bit like, this is it, I'm going to do it. There was a couple of things that happened that day that pushed me over the edge, and I tried to call a suicide helpline over here in the UK called Samaritans, and they didn't answer. And again, in hindsight, I know it's because they're understaffed and underfunded, so they were probably just busy. They had no phones, and they didn't answer. So when I was in this place of solitude and the help didn't even answer, my brain was like, see, you're a piece of shit. No one wants you. No one loves you. No one needs you, which obviously now I know to be not true. But in that moment, it seemed so real. And
yeah,
it's so weird. I don't know if you're familiar with a rapper called Dave. He's a UK rapper, and he's got a song called Psycho. And in the song, there is a line that says, if you're thinking about doing it, suicide doesn't stop the pain, it's only moving it. And that line kept playing in my head and playing in my head. And that's all that there was. And time seemed to stop and everything seemed to dissipate to nothing. And I'd text my mum that I was sorry and I love her and all this shit. Clearly haven't healed from that yet. And I was like, this is it, I'm done. And that line kept playing in my head. And obviously my consciousness was like, nah, not today. And then I took a step back from what I was trying to do. And it was only that moment, strangely, that I realized I needed help, was the whole point of this story. So what I was trying to say is, I know firsthand how hard it is to say, do you know what, I need help. I had to get to break. And some people aren't lucky enough to survive the breaking. I survived the breaking. And that's why I'm so open about my mental health, because no one told me it was okay to be fucked. And because I work in the building industry, the construction industry, it's very stoic, very stoic.
Yes.
And I remember speaking to my boss at the time. I remember speaking to my boss at the time, and I was like, you know, when they like, literally, I was like, well, if someone was thinking about committing suicide, like, what should they do? And the boss was like, the people that talk about it never fucking do it. They'd like, you know, and again, I don't blame him now, because his situation was probably a lack of education. And I was very angry for a very long time, and I'm trying to be a compassionate person nowadays, because if I walked his shoes, I would be saying the same things. It's the lack of education that's the issue. It's not necessarily the message the person's projecting. It's their trauma that they've been instilled. But these people around me are like, oh, you know, you would never do it. And I attempted to take my life, and I turned up to work the next day. I just turned up to work the next day, and I hadn't slept, and I was absolutely distraught. And I just felt nothing. I just felt nothing. And I turned up to work, and this is a different boss now, because this was the boss. I left the old company, started with a new company, and I still was exactly the same. But anyway, I turned up to work, and my boss was like, you look tired, like joking around. I was like, yeah, I tried to kill myself last night. And we have dark humor. And he was laughing. And he was like, you're not joking. I said, no, I'm not joking. And he was like, oh, fuck. And he didn't know what to do. And again, what do you do? Like, if you're not trained and you don't know, what do you do? And he was like, oh, man, just go home. And he's like, oh, you're going to be all right to go home. And he was really great. And he paid me for the day and all this other. And I had to go through all of that to realize that I was fucked, you know, like 8 months of torture. It was probably longer, but it was definitely at least 8 months of like hell. And the journey in the last 3 years has been fucking hell too. So I can understand why people don't talk, and I can understand why people don't share. And this is again why it's so important to me to share, because I had no one in my life. Like Fee, bless her, she was like, oh, because she knew, like no one else knew, but Fee, I was with Fee at the time, and Fee knew, and she would gently nudge me to be like, maybe we should consider like speaking to a doctor or getting some help. And again, I was angry, so I was like, there's nothing fucking wrong with me. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine, because I feel like I'm a man and I have to be tough, and my family are incredibly stoic. and I'm failing them because I'm sad, and all these emotions were like really apparent in my life. And I have quite a lot of feminine energy. I'm quite a masculine man, but I have a lot of feminine energy, and the two, like the repressed feminine energy was almost like making this surge, and I had like this big identity crisis, and I was going through all this different shit, like all in the space of like a fucking what felt like a week. But bringing it back, I was just, the question I guess I want to ask is, if someone's in this volatile place, how do you think? Because I don't know the answer, and I was there because people were trying to lead me to water, but I was refusing to drink until I broke, and then I was like, okay, I need help.
Yeah.
So in your professional advice, how would you suggest someone's partner / the individual as a general to start to seek advice and help that they need when they're in a similar situation to what I was in? It's a hard question. I know.
Yes, it is. I think the first part though is that I want to applaud you, one, for
I'm gonna cry. Skip over it.
just having a platform that you're sharing, because there's other people that are seeing what you're sharing that now gonna know, oh, I'm dealing with something as well. I need to seek help.
Yeah, that's why I
think
share.
having like role model is important. If you had saw your parents, especially male figure in your life, you had saw them asking for help, it would have been easier for you to ask for help when you were dealing with everything you were dealing with. But because, as you report, your family is very stoic, then you felt like you had to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think
it's all I
having
knew.
role models, yes, that's all you
Yeah.
knew. So I think having role models, just as you are being right now, for other people, gonna be helpful. If they are in a situation like this, they are able to like know what to do. So I think that is something that is very needed. And for some of the people in here, so quick background is that I've been working in the mental health field for the past 10 years now. I've done a suicide hotline, I've done crisis hotline, I've worked with law enforcement with crisis hotline as well, and I've done a group therapy and individual therapy. And when I was doing suicide hotline, because I want to touch on what you've mentioned, most people that were having suicidal ideation, they were not cowards. In so many ways, they were altruistic. They wanted to support. They often shared, hey, I don't want to be a burden on my family. I don't want to be a burden on the one that I love. So they never thought of them doing that as a selfish act. Oftentimes, it was an act to help other people, and it was an act to stop the pain. But what happened is that your brain is lying to you, because you feel like no one care, but part of it is people don't know. Like, you are waking up, you were telling people everything is okay, you were doing things, so people really thought you were okay. People really close can pay attention and say, oh, there's something that's gonna happen. But oftentimes you do not share, and you said people don't care, you said people don't love me, but those are lies that the brain is feeding you. And then the hopelessness kick in, because you feel like, well, if no one loves me, no one cares, I cannot get out of this, then I need to stop this. But again, it's because part of it is your brain is lying. So I think, one, being aware that our brain can lie to us, I think that's important, because that can help with the issue. So yes, but I wanted to touch on that, is that oftentimes people that are having suicidal ideation, they're not being cowards. Oftentimes it's because they have that sense of hopelessness, and they really cannot see that there's other option that exists. So I think that's one thing to address. The second thing is the fact that oftentimes we do not use our support system. And part of that is because we really feel like no one that I know have dealt with this, so let me not say anything. But little do you know, because emotion is something everybody deal with. So you might think your mom, your grandparents, they never dealt with none of those things. But I bet if you were to have a conversation with them, where they took one of those vaccines that caused them to tell the truth,
Yeah.
you would hear that they dealt with those emotions as well. And just like their grandparents and grandparents and grandparents, they thought they could not share it at all. They thought they had to keep all of that inside.
Yeah.
So I think it's knowing that this is not true that the men in my family, people in my family were all stoic. They dealt with those things as well. Some of them drank beer. And that was the thing. That was like the main thing to do, to drink a beer, to drink alcohol. But oftentimes they were drinking it as a way to suppress those emotions.
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question specifically, I think a couple things that can be done is starting with the root of the issue. I think parents need to acknowledge to the kids that those things exist and create an environment where the kids can have those conversations without feeling like they are weak or they are not strong enough if they are feeling those things. So I think it has to start with the family. I think even school as well, because yes, some school have like a school counselor, a mental health counselor, but there's still all of those stigma or it is not really addressed. So I think creating a space where it is addressed can really help our kids, which are going to become the adults later, to feel like mental health is something they can talk about. I would challenge the idea of your boss did not know enough. I think at this point in life, where we're at right now, with all of the education that's available, I think there's certain position you are in, you should challenge yourself to learn about those things. So I think there's so much knowledge that's available. There's so many people discussing those things. So I think your boss should have, again, I understand it was the lack of education, but
no, you're
there's
not
so
wrong.
much,
Yeah,
there's
you're
so
not
much
wrong.
education out there for you to be in that position, for you not to know how can I support my staff mentally. I think that's something he should have known. But I think so going back to direct the question. Back to, I think if you have people in your life and you feel like they are dealing with mental health, first know that denial can be a thing. You might be aware of something and they are not aware of it yet.
Yeah.
So I would say to continue to talk to them, continue to push them, even if they get mad at you, even like if they curse at you. I would say to continue to push them. But I think there's a way to talk to people though that is more conducive to change versus there's another way that causes them to be very defensive. So I think having that approach as well, like, hey babe, you used to be doing those things over the past week, but I've been seeing you have not been doing them. Is everything okay? Let's sit. Let's eat our favorite food. Let's watch our favorite TV show while we're talking about it. So I think the manner the conversation is had is important. I think having more than one suicide hotline can be important. So if you call one, they are not available. What are the backups I have? But more importantly, when you are doing well, I suggest creating something that's called I call it like a safety plan. But the way I explain it is, on that safety plan, you write your baseline. Like when I'm doing well, what are the things I can do for myself? What are the things other people can do for me? When I'm having my early warning sign, by early warning sign, I mean, sometime, let's say you used to sleep you're sleeping 8 hours, you're eating 3 meals a day, and you're going to the gym every day, right? If you were to start sleeping 6 hours and you're eating 2 meals and you're going to the gym 5 days a week, most people are not gonna know there's something wrong. Even you might not even know there's something wrong. But the truth is, there have been like a slight change that's happening where you're no longer at your baseline, because you used to sleep 8, now you're sleeping 6. You used to eat 3 meals, now you're eating 2. You used to go to the gym, let's say 5 days a week, now you're going 3. It's good to ask yourself, maybe this is nothing, but let me pay attention to it because I'm realizing things are starting to go. Again, it's not a big change, but it's a small one, but let me keep an eye on it. Then the next one would be when you are going on a downward spiral, how can you know? what are the symptoms, and how can other people help you? How can you help yourself? And when you're in a crisis, how can you know? How can you help yourself? How can other people help you? By creating a safety plan like this, it allows you to, one, know what your baseline is. But if you were to share that paper with someone else, they know what your baseline is as well. And during those early warning signs and downward spiral, you can be aware of it just as they can be aware of it. So you do not get to a crisis, because oftentimes when you get to the crisis, you at the bottom low, it can be very hard. It takes more work. But if you can address it during the early warning sign and downward spiral, it becomes easier. So that would be what I would suggest, is creating a safety plan of what do I do and how can I know? Because sometimes someone might be in a downward spiral, they don't even know that they are in it. So then you might feel like, oh, everything was good and now I'm in a crisis. But really, that's never the case. There's always little signs that cause you to go from doing good to crisis. But if you are not aware, it might be very hard to catch it. But if you are someone that can catch it, and that's by being proactive, that's something that I feel like that can be helpful. But for family members, I would say sometimes it is hard because the person might be in denial and not knowing, but make sure you continue. And for the person that's dealing with the thing, I think use your support system. You might feel like, oh, I feel like I'm a burden on my family. Well, be a burden on them for now. Like, oh, I'm a burden on my girlfriend. Be a burden on her for now. It is not long lasting. It's permanent. Right now, you're in a place where you need help. So let your support system help you, just as when they're in a place they need help, you're gonna be there to help them. So that would be my answer to that.
There's a cage fighter here, he's from the UK here, Paddy Pimlet, Paddy the Baddy. I don't really watch UFC, but he won a fight and he did a speech after the fight, and one of his best friends had just committed suicide, and he said, I would have rathered him to cry on my shoulder than me cry at his funeral. And I've brought this comment up because I want to tell a little story on this. So I've had some minor issues, but I know people who have much more serious conditions, and I feel bad that I don't know how to help them. So probably about a year ago now, I went on a stag do for my best friend. Me and my other best friend were, these are school best friends, not Reptile best friends, for people that follow me regularly. So myself and my other best friend were best men for, obviously, our third best friend. And we went to a town in the UK to go for a stag weekend. And I don't drink at all. So obviously the weekend I was drinking and there was barely sleeping. And those combinations plus a couple of other things allowed my immune system of my brain to drop. So I sort of went into a bit of a remission, and I had a really bad night, a really, really bad night. And all those suicide ideations came back, and I almost felt like I was right back to square one. And I'd been on this journey for 2 years of healing, and I'm now sad again. And because I was drunk, I couldn't rationale with myself. Anyway, we were outside in the smoking area. And again, I don't smoke. I've never touched drugs. I don't drink. We're outside in the smoking area. A couple of my friends were smoking. There was a guy. So I would have been, he was my age, and I'd have been 20. I've been 28, and he's about my age. He's a 28-year-old guy, sat on the floor, slumped. And I walked over to him and sort of tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "You all right?" And this is about, like I say, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're drunk. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, you?" And I was, again, myself. I was like, "No, I'm fucking not." And he was like, "Wow, what's wrong?" And I just unloaded all this shit onto this guy at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And he looked at me like gobsmacked. And he was a bit taken back. And he was almost looked like he saw a ghost. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And he was like, "Why are you so brave?" I said, "How am I brave?" He said, "Well, you've just said all this shit." I said, "I'm not brave. They're just fucking stories. My therapist keeps telling me they're stories, and they keep fucking swirling around in my head, and I'm getting angry at myself." He puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "I'm depressed." And I go, a bit taken back. And he goes, "You're the first person I've told." He said, "I've never told anybody." He said, "I'm depressed. My mum's recently just got diagnosed with bowel cancer. My girlfriend's cheated on me and I've lost my job. And he's like, I'm depressed. And I'm trying to remember it, but I was just a bit like, right, like just sort of didn't know what to say because it's not what I'd expected the conversation to, because normally
Yes.
people are like, oh, but... And then he starts crying and he's like crying. And I'm like, oh, can I talk with my hands? And his friends come out at this time where he starts crying. And this is 4 o'clock in a nightclub. And his friends just see me doing this and their friend crying. So his friends run over and they grab me and they push me against the wall. And I'm all a bit like, I don't know what's going on. And the guy, let's just call him Tim. Tim pushes his friend off me and goes, this brave fucker has allowed me to say I'm depressed, and shouts it like outside and just shouts it. And this is God's honest truth. It's a true story. And then the friend, let's just call him, I don't know, Ben. Ben starts crying. Tim's crying. And now I'm crying. And Ben goes, I knew you were depressed, Tim, but I didn't know how to ask you. And Tim goes, I didn't know how to tell you. And then I'm just sort of there. I don't know what to say. And I was just a bit like, oh. And then we all just start opening up. And all 3 of us are just a bunch of young men just crying our eyes out drunk outside a nightclub. And my friends come over and they're used to this now. And they're like, oh, fucking hell, are you doing your normal shit? And I'm like, yeah. And we came to this conclusion again. They kept bringing up this Roman Kemp documentary here in the UK. And they kept saying like, the ask twice. And this guy, Tim, he said to Ben, he was like, I think if you just outright asked me if I was okay, like really asked me if I was okay, I would have told you, but I was too scared. So I don't know the answer to the question, Ruben, but in the one instance that I'd had, I think like I'm on a journey at the minute because I'm very guilty, because I've been on a journey myself. I'm very guilty at trying to spill wisdom, and sometimes you just need to listen and just shut up and listen. And I'm very guilty of being like, oh yeah, well, when I felt like this, I did this. And sometimes people aren't after that. Sometimes people are just after a space and that's all they need. So just for me personally, approach your friend and just be like, hey man, like I'm going through some shit. If you ever want to just talk, I'm here. If you want me to talk, I'll talk. If you want me to listen, I'll listen. And then leave it at that. And sometimes they'll open up, others they won't. But then you do the weekly check-in. Just, hey man, you're good. Just keep checking in. Hello, Jonas. You've joined in at a very interesting point. There's no lizards here anymore. The lizards are gone. And it's, for me anyway, I don't know if you've got any better advice on it yourself, but for me, it's just that, like, this is going to sound dickish now, but I don't really care. I feel like I'm the better friend in my friendship group because I understand mental health, and I don't envy my friends. I'm very happy that my friends haven't experienced the lows that I've experienced. I'm very happy about that. And I don't wish them to, ever. This is speaking of the friends for the stag do friends. They've never experienced the lows that I've experienced, but obviously pain is relevant. And the worst thing that's happening in your world is the worst thing in the world, so I'm not trying to compare apples and oranges here, but what I'm saying is they haven't reached the point of like trying to end it. And because I feel like I have that little bit more empathy towards the subject. And that isn't to try and take anything away from them, but I think sometimes because they haven't experienced it, they are scared to try and talk about it because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Because that's like me coming on this podcast to try and talk about fucking how to change oil on a car. I ain't got a fucking clue. Never done it. So it's very much this no man's land where if you haven't been there, you haven't been in the trenches, as it were, you don't know how to return fire. And I think just allowing your friends, knowing that you can just be a shoulder to listen, an ear to listen, and not try and give the answers, because I've been very guilty of just trying to give answers, and sometimes people aren't after answers, they're just after like solidarity, as it were. But yeah, I don't know if you've got any advice on like on that sort of thing.
I think one thing I would say to Ruben is because in his question he said he doesn't know how to help them, how to really help them. I think one of the things that could help is actually asking them, how can I help you? Because sometimes we're doing all of those things to help someone, but we never ask them, what can I do to help you? Because all of the things you might be doing might not be what they would like. So I think that's where I would start. I would start by actually saying like, hey, bro, or hey, girl, how can I help you? How can I be there for you? And let them answer that. And one thing I do want to add is if you do go to someone and you let them know that you are here for them, you ask them how they can help, and they do not answer, it is not on you then if something happened to them. Because I think sometimes we do absorb other people, what's happening to them. Please remember, you can only help someone as much as they allow you to help them. And sometimes too, there are certain people you might not be the right person that can help. In those cases, you can refer them to someone else. So I think those are key things to remember as you are helping others is I can only help someone that wants to be helped. I can only help someone that wants me to help them. And in addition to that, the person has to be ready to put in action the thing that's being suggested. So I think that's good to remember. But I would start with asking them directly, hey, how can I help you? And based on the answer they gave you, then you can start helping them.
Yeah.
It's also very important as well that you do not ask someone, how can I help you? When you know you cannot help them. Because then if the person's like, hey, I would love for you to call me once a week, and you posted not to call them once a week, then they learn next time you ask them not to answer you.
Yeah.
Because you were not a person of your
It's
word
that
in the
evidence
first place.
base again, like at the
Yes,
start.
evidence based.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're gonna ask someone, hey, I'm there for you, it's good that if they do say what they would like, that you are able to have a conversation on whether or not you can do it. Because there's nothing worse versus asking someone, hey, I feel like you're going through something. I'm here for you. How can I help? And they tell you what it is, and you said, yes, you can help, but then you posted not to help them. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I think on that as well, because I was going to say, and obviously you've just addressed it, but sometimes you have to fill your own cup before you're able to pour water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, like I class myself as a little bit of an empath. I'm not an empath, but I'm a little bit of an empath. And for people that don't know what that is, that basically means like I absorb emotions and trauma around me. So if someone comes to me with their stuff, it negatively affects me. I may be able to help someone, but I mainly get it with animals. Like I see a reptile in a bad enclosure. It hurts me, and it gives me this massive overload of overwhelming empathy for these animals. And this is why I don't go on Facebook, and it's why I don't really want to be part of the community anymore. But it does happen with people, and sometimes giving yourself 10 minutes or a week or a day or whatever the case may be. Like I haven't done this podcast in like 6 weeks because I've just needed some time. And I feel like what an episode to come back with, eh? But sometimes it's, and I get people message me all the time, you know, because I'm now a social influencer of some degree, you know, 38,000 followers on Instagram. Shout out, like, subscribe. But what I'm saying is like there's this level of expectancy on me, and sometimes it gets too much, and everybody is going like you're at your job and you're stressed, and there's this level of expectancy. You've got this deadline, you know, you're supposed to pay for your first date or whatever. There's these levels of expectancy, and it's really hard sometimes just to go no, like because we're all people pleasers because of that evidence-based. Oh, Paul, I love your podcast. Oh, okay, I need to do another podcast. Don't get me wrong, I love podcasting. I'm not gonna try and sit here in front, but sometimes I just can't be fucked. I still make myself do it, but here we are. And just going on to like what Bam's saying here, the human we're meant to be in tribes. We're a social construct species, and again with the pandemic and like you say, the space of mental health, it's people sitting with themselves, people not being able to have their crutches, and also people being isolated and being alone,
Yes.
and not having also BH. I'll be completely honest, guys. I've not been ignoring you, but I've been ignoring you because if I drift into the chat, this conversation will go fucking everywhere. So I've been doing my best, but I have deliberately been ignoring you guys because otherwise my brain will just be like ping, 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 ping. And I'm trying to concentrate. But back to what Bam was saying, it's important to have someone, and it is a privilege to have someone that you have a level of trust with. But this is why I'm a massive advocate for therapy, because some of the stuff that I unloaded to my therapist, you have to be ready, because a lot of people go to therapy and they say it didn't work. But if you're not at a stage, which is completely fine, I appreciate you, Dad. Thank you very much for moving out the super chat. I have like none of my real dads are in the chat, but I have like a lot of founded fathers in here, which is nice. I appreciate you, Doug, my friend. See, it's gone. This is what happens, Doug. It's gone. No, it's gone. It's gone. See, it's gone. There you go. Can't remember what I was saying.
No, but one thing you were touching on was we go back to what Bum was saying about like the privilege with the therapist, is that sometimes if you go to therapy and you are not addressing anything with your therapist,
that's it. Yeah.
Then there's no way your therapist can actually help you because they don't know what's going on. But if you go to therapy and you are willing to address those things, I think that can be helpful. And going back to Bum is that sometimes it's the outcome that matters. Let's say you do not have a friend that you can fully open up and have that trust with. You can go to a therapist. And the reason the therapist can be helpful is because, for example, in Florida, there's a confidentiality between me and a client that says that I cannot share the information to anyone else. And if I were to share that information, I can go to prison for more than 5 years. I'll have to pay like a ton of fine. And because of that confidentiality, that trust can be built faster because that person know I am someone they can speak with about anything.
Yeah.
And I cannot share that information to anyone else. So I think that's something like if you do not have a friend right now, you can trust at that level. Having a therapist can be helpful. And remember, one way to gain that trust with a friend is by studying in the first place. If you are not sharing anything with your friends to know whether or not you can trust them, then that trust is never going to be there. So I think, Paul, that's what you were talking on. You were talking on about like the therapy and like how for you, you had to be ready to know that someone that you have to talk to.
Yeah, thank you for steering my brain back, because this is why I'm ignoring you lot, because my brain just goes boop. But yeah, there are certain things that I wasn't ready to share with anybody. So I needed that in partial party. And there are still a couple of things that only my therapist knows, not even like Fee knows. There are some things that I haven't yet addressed with a therapist because I wasn't ready to talk about it.
Yes.
And all of that is okay because it's all about progressing. And for me, I think, I'll be completely honest, again, before breaking, I would have just gone to a therapist and been like, what do you want from me? Because I wasn't in a place of vulnerability. Like I was in a place of, how can I word this? Protection. My brain was like, we're safe, we're fine. And I had to break. And I said to you over message when I reached out to you and asked if you'd like to come on. I said to you, like, it happening to me was the best thing that ever happened to me. And don't get me wrong, it's a horrific thing. But for me, it's enabled me to liberate myself and actually start to try and figure out who I am, which is scary, but also fun. And I owe a lot of that to therapy because I can't expect, because I felt like a burden. I didn't want to bother my friends, my family. I didn't want to bother anybody. But then there's this lady that I pay money to. So if I'm paying you money, then I'm going to tell you all my shit. So
yes,
I was like, right. And I remember my very first therapy session, and I sat down on a sofa. Absolutely lovely. I love my therapist. She's incredible. She's an elderly lady, and I just almost felt safe I don't know how I would have felt talking to a man, I'll be completely honest, because in my head, at the time, I'd have been judged, even though I know now I wouldn't. But at the time, I was like, I feel like I need to.
Yeah, because that would connect to that stoic ideation you have in your head that like men are supposed to be a certain way. So talking to another man could have caused you to feel like, oh my God, I'm talking to a man and I'm being vulnerable. Men are not supposed to do that. So sorry, yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, you're right, because no men in my life are vulnerable. So I have no evidence to show that men are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I find it even harder to be vulnerable because I have no vulnerable role model. This is just all off the fucking fly. You know, I don't have someone to show me how to do this. It feels right for me, so I do it. And I see these like pictures of breaking cycles, and you normally see it with like the snakes. It's like the dad's like, snakes are bad, kill them, to the son, to the granddad, saying to the dad saying to the son, then the son, like us, we're like, no, snakes are good, and we break the cycle. But for me, it's more for trauma. And like for my son, I'm a dad, and I have my son on the weekends, and no clue how to be a dad because I don't want to be the dad that I had. So it's all trying to make sense of something I have no idea. But it's, for me, it was a case of I can't free myself talking to a man because, again, I feel like I need to talk to feminine energy. So it's not even so much men, but the men in my life are masculine stoicism. And I feel like I needed that almost nature nurture that comes with the feminine energy rather than anything else. And I met my therapist and I sat down on the sofa at her house and I just sort of sat down and I was all like uptight like this, you know, like nervous and like soothing myself and stuff. And she was like, so like, is there anything really you want to address? And I just let loose 25 years of trauma in like 20 minutes. And she just sat back and she was like, and I went, oh, actually, and then I went off another 3 or 4 things. And she was like, are you joking, Paul? And like, because I talk like this, I laugh when I do it and smile. This is my personality. And she's like, you're being serious? So after I told her all this stuff, I said, oh yeah, I'm being deadly serious. Yeah. And she was like, I have no idea how you're smiling, but that is a lot. And I was like, yeah, you haven't got to tell me. And it was only at that moment that I realized it was a lot. Because in my head, that's just my life. Like,
so you know, like many comedians use laughter as a coping skill. So laughter is actually another coping skill as well, where sometimes we're going through things and they are so hard. The brain, again, as a way to protect you, the brain is like, let's laugh about this. But I think that's something here that we can see that was present is sometimes you're dealing with something, it's like the only thing you can do is laugh. But that
100%.
laughter is being used as a coping skill. And we see that in many comedians, whenever they share like all of the trauma that they experience, like they had to use comedy and laughter as a way to cope. So
oh no, you're 100% right. I have quite a stoic demeanor. So when I talk, other than obviously a couple of times in the podcast where I've got a little bit choked up, for the most part, I can talk about anything and I'll be deadpan or I'll be sort of smiling about it. And I will say that I tried to commit suicide with a smile on my face, and people are like, I don't know, you're a psychopath or something. But that's just that is my armor. That's my, you know, and I think a lot of people, when I talk about these subjects, don't think I take it seriously because of the way I project it. But again, that's just me, and I've learned to accept that, because I think a lot of the times, like we say, when you try and say no to people, like if I was to try and present this podcast, this episode, in my head carefully, I wouldn't speak because I'd be too worried about saying this or doing that or act. So for me, I can only be what's true to me. And I think I've had people message me and they have thanked me for my vulnerability. And if I can be like one person, if this episode can help one person, like be like, yeah, the fuck, that's me. I'm buying lizards, or I hate my job or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, the time is worthwhile, and
I agree.
I don't know. I don't know how we fix the problem, but I know that I would like to be part of the solution.
Yeah. And I think part of fixing the problem is actually being aware that there's a problem in the first place. So I think having that awareness that it exists, that's the first part. So I think, well, as we're working towards like the solution, I think those are the things we need. We need more people to be like more vocal about those things. And as more people are being vocal, especially men, because that's something we're seeing in the United States, I'm sure in the UK as well, is men are disproportionately sharing less about mental health, not addressing mental health, or sometimes experiencing mental health and not even know it's mental health, thinking this is just life,
Yeah.
when really, no, it's mental health. And if they
Yeah.
had addressed it, things could have been better. And so many people wait until it's too late. Then it takes longer, because one thing we see, like in your example, if for 25 years you had trauma, it won't be able to be solved within 1 year.
No.
And sometimes this is what we saw as well, is some people, some men, or everyone, where they've been dealing with something for like 10, 15, 30 years, and then they go to see a therapist, and they think that, okay, within 1 month of therapy, everything gonna be great.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way realistically you can deal with something for 20 years and in 1 month you're gonna fix it. It is something that usually take time. Especially, you might think, oh, the thing I'm dealing with is this. Then you go to your therapist and you find out those things were just symptoms of an issue. So you were just focusing on the symptoms, but the main core of the issue was never addressed. And addressing the core of the issue gonna cause you to find out other things as well. So it becomes this whole like issue now that needs to be addressed. But the good news is, as you start working on those things get better. Like incrementally, things gonna get better. And that's gonna have a compound effect in life later on as you are working on those things. And there's gonna be some days you're gonna have bad days. As humans, we're gonna have good and bad days.
Yeah.
But I think being able to, when we're having those bad days, being able to remember the good things. Because I think one thing we deal with is sometimes we focus only on the negative. I mean, we saw that on YouTube in the past, where someone would receive 1,000 likes and 1 negative likes, and they would focus on that 1 negative like without focusing on that 1,000 they receive. And we do the same thing in life, where we receive all of those good compliments, but there's that one bad. And instead of like seeing the positive, we now start thinking about the bad and make the bad like, okay, this is what it is about. I need to focus on this one. So I think that's what we have to do. I think it's acknowledging the negative, being able to view it and being able to address it. But let's not forget all of the positive that's happening. And I think for some people that may deal with mental health, here is one thing I do see is sometimes people do view their mental health as themselves. And I'm like, it's only part of you. Someone that have diabetes, do not say I am diabetic. Do not present themselves as that everywhere. They understand this is something they deal with and they have to address it. But there's all of those other things that's also them. So you are not just depression. You are not just anxiety. You are not just borderline, bipolar, ADHD. It's part of you, yes. But there's all of those additional things that's part of you as well. There's all of those other characteristics that you have that's also part of you as well. But whenever you do focus on the only on the diagnosis, then it becomes that lens that you're only seeing yourself through without acknowledging all of those other things that also exist. So I think that's important.
I think as men, so we have like, obviously everyone has their pillars of life. So you have your financial stability, your mental health, your family, let's just say your reptiles, the gym, the job. Like you might only have 3 pillars. Some people might have 20. It's you know, you have these core pillars, and when one goes wrong, so for me personally, I have So my day job is obviously I need to do that, which so we'll call that financial stability. My reptiles, my relationship, my son, my social media.
Mhm.
So I have my 5 pillars. I had 6. I had the gym. I stopped going to the gym, and because I stopped going to the gym, I got weaker. I got a bit chubbier, has symptom of not going to the gym. But the social media was going really well. You know, the job, okay, I was bringing in money. Social media going well. The reptiles are going well. Relationships going well. So all of these other pillars were being flourishing. They were being nurtured. But the one pillar that had failed is all I could focus on. And
Yeah.
I think as men, as a general, and again, I hate saying as men, but as people, we focus on this one thing. Like, for example, it could be the job. Like for me right now, it is the job. So I'm focusing on my job that I don't like, and I'm forgetting that I'm doing really well on the social. I'm forgetting that I've got a great relationship. I'm forgetting that, you know, I'm making a difference. I'm forgetting that I'm a dad. I'm forgetting that I'm a friend, and I forget all of
Yes.
this because I am blindsided by the fact I'm an electrician I don't want to be. And to be honest, I it's not a curse, but I'm going to say it's a curse. I find it's a curse to be self-aware and introspective, because I lay there at night and I'm like, why the fuck have I got these thoughts? Like, why the fuck can't I just wake up and be like, yep, day job, clip, do my job, come home, lizard, like, go to bed, you know? Why?
So the part I want to challenge in that is it's not a curse because self-awareness is a wall. But being self-aware on the negative things could be viewed as a curse. Because, for example, I could say I am self-aware and I can see the things I cannot control. But I could also use that same self-awareness to also see the things I can control. So we can use self-awareness to view the negative, but to also view the positive. But a lot of people use self-awareness and become very aware of the negative things that's happening, or the unhealthy things that are happening. Then therefore you're gonna view self-awareness as a curse. But if you also view that self-awareness to view, oh, there's all of those things I have control over, there's all of those things that I love, then you are then using self-awareness to its full potential. The example I always give is, imagine if it's raining. If it's raining, you might not have control over the rain, and you do not have control over the weather. That is self-awareness, letting you know that you do not have control over those things. But you could use that same self-awareness to realize, oh, I have control over wearing an umbrella. I have control over staying inside or going outside. I have control over just walking in the rain. I have control over wearing rainy boots. So when you see it that way, you're able to see, yes, there are things I do not have control over, but even within that, there are certain things I do have control over. So I think in that part, I would then say self-awareness, when used on our level, would be viewed as not as a curse, but as something positive. But if you only focus on the self-awareness, on the unhealthy things and the negative, then it could be viewed as a curse. What do you think?
I just want to interject into this. They looks like they're all fighting amongst themselves, but I'm going to leave them to it. Thanks for this one, man. Always hitting up in my feels. Always there for you. Also, the hair is sexy. I think he's talking to you about that, because mine needs a trim. Thank you, Gary, man. I appreciate you. No, you again, the same lady that I was talking to about the nature nurture side of saving reptiles, we speak, and she said to me, she said, you always focus on your negative, you never focus on what could you do. Like, you are always going, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I'm always this isn't good enough, and this needs to be better, and this wants to do this, and this wants to do that. You never go, you're succeeding in helping these people, you're pushing out a good message, you're a great boyfriend, you're this. Like, she was like, you always focus on the negative. And her and I, we have great conversations, and I love her for that, because she challenges me. And this is just a lady that I met over through social media, and her and her partner are both similarly aligned with my belief sets and stuff, and we have these great conversations. And she does challenge me, and she goes like, she said, well, why are you like this? Like, why is your brain this preset? And again, I think it comes down to the time scalings, because I've had 25 years of not being myself and focusing on negatives and being the stoic individual that I'm not. And then I've had 3 years of trying to become myself. So the lines are still blurred, and every day I sit with myself and I try and think about like, how am I feeling today, and how is this and how is that, and why is this and why is that, and I do that, and sometimes it comes up with nothing, and I'm like, oh, cool, we're okay today. And the dancing in the rain thing, so like you say, you can't control the rain. One day you wake up and it's raining and you're supposed to go outside and play sports. Then you have 2 choices. You can curse the rain, which is out of your control, or you can reschedule your plans, or you can just go and play in the rain. You know, there are options, but the people, I'm one of them, or I'm trying not to be, but I'm one of them. They go, fuck's sake, it's fucking raining, you know, I've got plans today and it's bloody raining, and you can't control that. That's out of your control. And you're feeding this negative energy into this community that, like, for me, if I'm in a bad mood and I start posting negative stuff and I'm like, oh, fucking life's shit, you know, fucking it's fucking raining and all this other stuff, like, people will feed from that. Either, oh, Jesus Christ, Paul, or for example, like Fee, if I'm, fuck's sake, Fee, we were supposed to go to the zoo today and it's fucking raining, and I'm not mad at Fee, I'm mad at the rain that I can't control, but Fee is now taking the brunt of that projected anger. And it's incredibly not self-aware of me to not realize that. And it would be self-aware for me to realize that and go, do you know what? Let's just go tomorrow. Let's go next week. You know.
But the thing that's hard is that, so our brain is biased towards negative. So it does take, it's harder for you to focus on the negative, on the positive, the negative. It's easier to see the negative. So going back to that mean, the first thing that might come to your head was like, damn, it is raining. But it's being able to catch yourself and change that. So many of you guys here, you might find yourself still thinking of the negative and still saying that negative thing. But whenever you do find yourself saying it, take a moment and say the positive. Because this is better, because we are not telling you guys to, studying today is to start viewing all of the positive that's happening in the world. No, we're saying, while you're acknowledging the negative, damn, it is raining. Take a moment to yourself and realize, I can control the rain. So I can continue to curse at the rain as much as I want. Nothing gonna change. What do I have control over? I have control over rescheduling. I have control over choosing to go play in the rain. I have control over to tell my homeboys, hey, instead of playing basketball outside, come inside, let's play some cards, let's play some dominoes. That's what I have control over. So I think you might find yourself, when those things do happen, the first thing that your brain tells you is to be mad. And you might find yourself mad. But whenever that happens, be able to catch yourself and say, you know what, Fee? I'm sorry for the way I just talked. I wasn't supposed to say that. Let's do that again. What can we do? Or for anyone here, being able, whenever you say those things, catch yourself and do something else. And I think as you continue to practice that, it's gonna get easier. There's 2 great books. One is called Atomic Habits, and the other one is called The Compound Effect. I think both of them are also available on YouTube for free to just listen to. Both of those really goes into like developing like new habits, because habits are not developed like within a day. It does take time, but it goes back to that 1%. If last week you curse at the rain every day, but this week you only curse at the rain 4 days, that's progress. Next week, 3 days, that's progress. a month from now, one day, that's progress. But I think many times we want to go from cursing at the rain 7 days a week to go to zero. And that's often unrealistic because really we cannot do that. It's very hard to do. So, but yeah, I would say to again, it all go back to incremental progress, doing 1% better today, 1% better next week, 1% better next month, and just continue to do that.
I just want to address this quickly.
Mhm.
So, Alistair, my friend, earlier, like literally 5 minutes ago, when I was saying that I say everything stoically like this, deadpan, right? When I said Crowley, I was indeed referring to Crowley from Supernatural, who is the ruler of hell. I personally don't know you. I don't know if you do or do not rule hell. If you do, great. If you don't, great. I did not mean any offense. I'm sorry if it was taken, but I feel like everything has been taken out of context, and I feel like everybody just needs to peace and love. All right. Anyway, wait, I don't know why I bother sometimes. But yeah, it's again, my brain's drifted because I'm listening to that. But yeah, I try to sit with myself every day. And for me, I said to you off air, the moments of like serendipity, of like these little moments of you walk outside and you see a and also just quickly because my brain's going, I didn't even read your comment. The comment you put like ages ago, I haven't even read it. I just saw Crowley, and I know Crowley is a demon from this channel Supernatural. So I was like, he's the ruler of hell. That's literally it. It's not that deep. So
And I think right there, this is a good example. And again, Aleister, we are sorry, but I think this is a good example of how right now we are focusing on mental health, and this is mainly what we've been addressing. But within the comments, there's gonna be other people that's gonna share something, and it's gonna be like, hey, this was a coincidence. Based on the context of what we've been addressing, we have not been going after anyone in the comment section. But you could see how someone could feel like, hey, oh, I feel like you're addressing this towards me, when really this is a conversation we've just been having. So, Alistair, we are sorry.
We're all
but
good.
yes, that wasn't the case here.
I put Crowley, but this is what I'm saying. This is
yes,
a perfect
so we are
example.
sorry, man.
But
We're
this is
sorry.
sort of what we've been talking about, though, because like I just
Yeah.
put something in the comments and it meant nothing, but to somebody,
Yeah.
regardless of what happens, like
Yes.
because you could be in the supermarket and you could cut in front of somebody, and it's something so, or you could say something in passing. It could be something so like yeah, Crowley is in Good Omens as well, but I was thinking Supernatural feet, but he is in Good Omens as well. But like you could say something passing, and to somebody it could be the end of the world because
Yeah.
they don't understand what you're saying, and that's completely fine. But normally, when there's context given, you're like, oh, everybody's like, oh.
Yeah.
But sometimes in life, there's no context because that one thing will happen, and then everyone goes about their day. And then, for example, if I didn't address this now, everyone would have carried on talking about it, arguing amongst themselves because there's no context and no
Yes.
one knows if they're coming or going. And this is that whole thing of no one's in the right and no one's in the wrong. It's just a misunderstanding. And sometimes in life, like I say, that can happen. Like someone cuts you up in traffic and they've just had a really bad day and their girlfriend's just left them. And they've had a really bad day, so they cut you up, and you're having a great day. So you're bimping your horn at this person who's just cut you up, and this person's having the worst day of their life so far.
Yeah. Or sometimes they end up cutting you because they didn't even see you, but now you think they have something against you when it wasn't the case. But one of the good things that Corley did is they addressed it, and because they addressed it, we were able to mention like, hey, we weren't talking about this at all. And that's something that can be helpful, because sometimes if someone said nothing at all, but they felt like they were offended, then it doesn't give us a chance to address our part that, hey, that's not what we're trying to do at all. So I think that's important. Again, going back to communication is very important, and being able to just talk and remember, we're just trying to share love.
I was talking about again, my brain's gone now, but oh yeah, serendipity. So I have these little moments of like, you go outside and I don't know, you see a little bird on a branch, and for 5 seconds you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Or you go out herping, or you're in your reptile room, or you're with your loved ones, and you have these little 5-minute moments of peace. Because I don't know if other people can relate, but my brain, it never shuts up. Like, good, bad, negative, doesn't matter. There's always something somewhere going on. And as we've seen a couple of times here, if I do drift, my brain just goes whoop, and I can't help it. It's just the way my brain is. So I have to learn to control it. And that's why I've been ignoring all of you. But for me, these little moments of bliss, I feel like at times they've generally saved my life. And I'm not saying that just to be like almost like supersede it, but there have been times where I've had such a terrible day, like such in my perspective, it's like the worst day ever, and it's all this and all doom, gloom, hatred. And the smallest little thing will happen, like this little moment in time that's unplanned and unprecedented, and it's just presented itself at the perfect time. And if you allow yourself to be present and absorb that moment, that can be the difference between having like a really, really bad day or getting your foot onto the ladder to start climbing up to get better again, if that makes sense, because it gives you a break from the storm. And I don't know how you get good at doing it. And I'm terrible at being present, because my brain drifts. So sometimes Fee will be talking to me and my phone will ding, and I don't mean to do it, but I'll just be like, it's very rude. I know it's rude, but my brain's like, there's a message. I need to read the message. And that's why I have to put it on silent for the podcast. And that's why I can't really go to the chat. And I think it's important to understand yourself and understand your boundaries so you can understand your cues and your triggers in order to be able to reset yourself so you don't continue to like fall, if that makes sense.
Yes, I agree. And I think practice as well can help, because oftentimes, like if I am, let's say I'm someone that cannot stay focused, then all I have to start doing that can be helpful is, let me try to be focused for 1 minute today. And that's going to be the goal. And I'm going to do it for 1 minute today, and I'm going to check that I did it. Next week, I might let me try to stay focused for 5 minutes. And whenever I'm doing that as well, on the days that I was not able to do it, I can write down what happened that caused me not to stay focused for 5 minutes. What can I learn from it? And next week, do it again. So I think practice can be something that's very beneficial in that situation, because as we start practicing and we're able to do those things, that's going to increase our confidence in doing more. It's like going to the gym. If I'm lifting like 45 pounds, after I'm able to lift it for a couple of weeks, the next week I can add 5 pounds to it. The next week, 10 pounds. And I can continue to incrementally increase and do better. So it's going back to doing that 1% better each day. And that's going to compound itself for a long time.
The top level athletes, no matter, or the top level anybody in anything, I listen to a podcast. I'm quite behind on it at the moment. It's called The Diary of a CEO. There's a guy over here called if you haven't heard of it, I reckon you'd really enjoy it. There's a guy over here called Stephen Bartlett, and he's a self-made millionaire. Think he classes himself as an immigrant. He's from Nigeria, and he was forced over here to UK by his parents, and he has all this trauma and stuff. And he's made himself a millionaire. And I love him. I think he's fucking great. And he has a podcast called The Diary of a CEO, and it's changed my life. And he has celebrities, experts, all different people, therapists. He had a guy, I forget his name now, but he's an ADHD specialist, and he was actually a child of the Holocaust. Like, he was in like the whole thing. So he's got like trauma for days. Yes. And he lost his parents to the Holocaust and stuff like that. So, and these people are telling their stories, and you listen to this podcast, and for me, I take like one tool from every episode and I put it into my toolbox. And sometimes there's no tool for me to pick up from that episode. Other times there's 2 tools, and you don't realize that you're picking them up. And then all of a sudden life presents you with a situation where you've heard, listened, spoke, you know, and then by just association or proxy, you go, oh, this person on this podcast said about this, maybe I could act like this to enable me to have an outcome like that. And then again, by this, like people that are scared of flying, you've had a bad flight. You know, you go on a plane, you have turbulence, you're scared of flying. You go on a plane 10 more times and they're all smooth sailing. You're no longer scared of flying because that evidence-based knowledge of your brain, you're like, well, the plane's not scary anymore because yes, we had one bad experience, but we've had 10 good experiences. And it's the same with depression and anxiety in my experience, that, you know, you get anxious about something. I'm developing anxiety of late. I've never really struggled with anxiety, to be honest. I've had, like, you know, you go for a job interview, you get a bit nervous. I've had very basic level anxiety. I've never had like crippling anxiety. I've had the depression side, but I'm starting to sort of develop anxiety, and it's almost like this new demon to fight and to face. And it's like, well, like, this is for me, this is unknown territory, and all these tools that I've equipped, they're not fit to fight this new thing. And I'm kind of excited about it in a weird kind of way, because I'm like, okay, I get to find more about myself because I'm at that stage in my journey. And I think that simple mind shift of how exciting we get to find stuff out about ourselves, rather than, let's just say, woe is me, because that's how I would say it. That can be the difference. Don't get me wrong, I still have terrible days and I still, I'm like, it's just fucking shit. What's the fucking point in anything? But I get to the place where I'm like, oh, cool, I get to dive deeper into my psyche and figure out who I am as a person. And sometimes, like, looking at yourself in the mirror, hypothetically, not literally, so metaphorically, not literally, is scary, because you have to face all that you're scared of. You know, like, when you really look into yourself, you see all your scars. And, you know, scars aren't meant to be beautiful, but scars also tell stories, and stories are just stories, and they're done. So you can relish in the beauty of that story that you scripted, and sit back and sort of bask in its glory and going, yeah, I did that. I walked that path. I did that. If it's too painful, you can close the book and you can put it in the bookshelf and you can never look at it again. But the scars do tell stories, you know. And for me, I'm very proud of the journey I'm pursuing, because I can only speak for myself, and I'm very proud of myself with where I've come. I'm nowhere near there yet, and I don't think I'll ever get there, but that also excites me. But I'm 29, just turned 29, and I feel like I've had a lot of life lessons for a 29-year-old, and I'm very grateful for that. At times I'm not, but when I am in control of my brain, and when I have, and this is going back to that flipping it and being self-aware, you know, if this stuff never really happened to me, like, where would I be? Or what would, I'll just be, I don't know, like, no dig to my friends, but just going to the pub and having a beer and just be like, yeah, hey, fellas, you know. And I wouldn't be here now talking on the internet about, like, the time I tried to, like, end my life and stuff, and hopefully helping people. And it's 3 years ago, I wouldn't have seen that. 3 years ago, I would have been like, and I've gone on a tangent. The point I was trying to make is the top percentage of people, hence the podcast, because the podcast was talking about that. The top percentage of people, they focus on the 1%, and you can be the best in the world, but if you get 1% a day better, you know, if you're looking at, so let's say you want to book, like, I've had a couple of people message me and be like, oh man, I would love a reptile collection like yours, right? So we'll try and focus on reptiles. I love a reptile collection like yours. And they're like, how can I get it? And I'm like, it didn't happen overnight.
Overnight,
like, yeah, you have to every day 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, and all before you know it, it's 5 years down the line, and you've been doing 1% for 365 days, five times in 5 years, like times 5. So whatever, someone do the maths, like 1,500 days or whatever that is. You've been doing 1%. So you're 1,500 times better than the person that sort of sat and went, oh, I just want a reptile collection like that. And it's the same with the mental health. I hate going to the mental health gym, and I hate checking in on myself, because sometimes my brain goes, we're not feeling great today, Paul. Have this anxiety, depression, you're a piece of shit. But that enables me to grow, and it enables me to, like, I realized recently in these little moments I have with myself, I realized that I had to go through the dark in order to show people light. And whether that be true or not, I find peace in it, and it makes it almost seem okay. But again, 3 years ago, I didn't want to be here. So when this too shall pass is in my Instagram bio, like, the rain is never permanent, and after the rain there's mud, and it's fucking shit, and you have to sludge through it. But eventually the sun does come out, and I don't know at what point I realized that. I wish I did on my journey, but one day, I remember it vividly. I remember just thinking to myself one day that I'm okay. And I just literally, I remember sitting with myself, and I remember going, I feel okay. And it's the first time I'd felt okay in about 2.5 years, at least, that I can reflect on. And it was almost like all of a sudden everything just came crashing down, in the sense of like, fuck, like, I'm okay. Like, I fucking did it. I'm okay. And I wasn't necessarily sad the day before realizing that. I just hadn't opened that door to realize that, like, I was okay. And again, this is all just a bit of a ramble, but I think it just throwing ideas to the wall. I also learned as well from Gary Vee, of all people. He said he creates multiple forms of content in multiple different ways, saying the same message differently every single time, because no two people understand the same message the same way.
That's true. Yes.
So the more you say it in different ways at different times, because, like, you could say to me, Paul, you need to go to therapy the day before attempting to end my life, and I'd have been like, no, because I wasn't ready to hear it. Obviously I did need to, but I wasn't ready to hear it. And it would have probably taken the right person to say it the right way. Because if someone said to me, Paul, in 5 months' time, you're going to break your arm, but if you go to the doctors now, you won't break it. I go, fucking okay. Well, let's go to the doctors. Like, I don't want to break my arm. If someone says to me, right, in 5 months' time, Paul, your brain's going to break, I go, what are you fucking on about? My brain's going to break. I'm going to be fine. Like, therapy is something that you can do. You don't have to be broken. And we said about it earlier, you know, if people go too late and then it takes too long, like, it doesn't hurt to check in with people. It doesn't hurt to talk to people. It doesn't hurt to go to therapy, even if you're okay.
Yes, and I think that's important, because so many times people feel like something have to be wrong to go to therapy, when really I said everyone should go to therapy. You can go to therapy proactively to learn tools, so when bad days do come, you know how to deal with them better. Because the truth is, as humans, we're gonna have good days and we're going to have bad days. That's something, it is inevitable. We're gonna have good days, we're gonna have bad days. And being able to learn those tools, make our mental health, like our mental state, stronger, is something that is beneficial. And in addition to what Paul mentioned about like the 1% every day, because of the compound effect, if I do 1% every day for 365 days, it's no longer 365. There's a compound in it that increases it to a higher number. And the book on the compound effect, it addresses just that. It's like how you're doing 1% every day in a 5-year term has a compound effect that increases drastically. But what you're gonna see though is usually during the first 30 days when you're doing 1%, you might not see anything. And that's just like a plant. Whenever you plant something, usually the first thing it does is it builds roots first. So you don't see anything and you're like, oh, nothing must be happening. But really, it's just taking a long time for the roots to be built first. And after that, it starts growing. But many of the time we don't think that. So we're working 30 days, 60 days. We're like, oh, I've been working on this for 60 days. nothing has happened. But little do you know, it is working. You're just not seeing it yet. Then
Yeah,
over
exactly.
time, you're gonna have like that factor where it increases compounding. So I think that's important to keep in mind of like do 1% a day. And your 1% can be different each day as well because we're different. Today, maybe all I can do is get up, take a shower, and go to bed. And tomorrow, I might be in a state where I can clean the whole house. So don't be flexible because your day to day gonna change. Your capacity to do certain things gonna change as well. And there are some days you're gonna be able to use your coping skills by yourself, and other days you might need your support system to be there for you. So that's going to change as well. But I think if we have a fixed mindset and we think, oh, I can work on the coping skill myself every day, I'm good. You're going to find there are certain days the coping skill you've used last week are not working this week. So you might need different coping skill. So again, it's being able to understand how that works. Two things I want to add as well. There's a TED talk on neuroplasticity, which is a great TED talk I would suggest anyone listen to because they really address how their brain continues to grow. Your brain is always working. We used to think like their brain stopped growing at a certain age, but we're finding out their brain continues to grow. And that can be positive, that can also be negative. That means the behaviors you have right now that you feel like you were stuck with, if you were to start working with a new behavior, because of neuroplasticity, that can replace your old behaviors. That is good news. But that also means if you used to work on things and you stop working on it, deterioration could happen. But neuroplasticity is something that's very important to understand because it helps you know I'm not going to be stuck like this forever because my brain can change. So people that deals with trauma, PTSD, that can be good information to be aware of is neuroplasticity can be beneficial. The second one, there's another TED talk that focus on how to make stress your friend. In this TED talk, some of the research, one thing they find is not that stress itself that kill people, it's the thought that stress is bad for you. So people that are stressed, but that view stress as a positive thing, and view stress gonna help them keep going. In those research, there were no difference between how long they lived to people that were not stressed, but people that thought that stress was bad for them live a lesser time. So TED talk on how to make stress your friends and TED talk on neuroplasticity would be two things I would suggest people to watch because they really go into like perspective. So as Paul mentioned, like, hey, I'm seeing some anxiety, but I'm excited to address it, to work on it, make his perspective ready to like, okay, what do I need to do? Compared to someone else that's dealing with anxiety, that's like, oh my God, this is gonna be the end of me. Because of those two different perspectives, each people are gonna address it differently. So it's very important to understand how impactful your perspective is. So I would definitely suggest watching those two TED Talk because they really go into like the details of that.
I saw a clip today, and it and again, I can believe something to be true, but it doesn't necessarily resonate until I'm ready to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a clip from a British comedian called Jimmy Carr, and he basically said, he was like, think about how you act throughout the day and how you're presenting yourself through the day. Like if you're having a bad day and if you're having a bad day and you're moody one day of the 7, and that's happening 4 times a month, then you're just having a bad day. If you get to the end of the month and you've had 6 bad days every week and you're rude to waiters and you're angry and car traffic or whatever the case is, he was like, you're just an asshole. And he's obviously making a joke of it. And that resonated with me because there have been times in my life where I've been short with people and I've been, let's say, rude. You know, I like to think I am I'm trying. I say I'm trying to be this compassionate person, but there are times where I lose my temper. There are times where I get pissed off. There are times I get short, and it is never anyone's fault around me. It's only my perspective of the world. And I sort of listened to that, and I was like, "Fucking hell, I'm an arsehole." And obviously, the joking situation, I'm not. I'm dealing with trauma. I'm just healing, but sometimes it's not an excuse. Like it's not. It's never okay to be rude to people. You know, like yeah, all right, you're going through shit, but it's never okay to be rude to an innocent bystander. And that for me was something that sort of sat with me and was like, "Fuck, I wish I got help a lot sooner."
Yeah.
So I wasn't a menace to these people through my dark times, because it's not their fault. And again, I don't think I've ever been too bad, but all it takes is just not to say thank you to someone, because I don't know what that person's going through, because you're too busy being self-indulged with my woes, troubles, which is completely fine because you have to fill your own cup before you can pour. But it's also important to try and have perspective that you are not alone and everybody is dealing with some shit. Some people are just better at hiding it. Because like we said, like my parents might be incredibly stoic, but my dad drinking every night isn't because he likes the taste of beer. So
Would be to suppress. Yeah.
yeah.
And you know, so one thing you just mentioned that's important is so there's this thing called automatic negative thoughts, also known as distorted thinking. And one of the distorted thinking is guilt beating. And in guilt beating, one thing they've mentioned is if in the past, because you just mentioned like, hey, I wish I had helped people sooner. And the truth is, you cannot go back to help people sooner. What you can do now that you are here is you can continue to help people. And that's very important because sometimes we beat ourselves for things we did not do. And the truth is, we can't go in the past to change that. But once we become aware of like, oh, I should have helped people in the past. Well, I did not. Let me start helping people right now. And so many times we spend so much time focusing on us not helping people in the past instead of like, well, how about I start doing it now? Like, hey, I've done all of those bad things prior to listening to this podcast, to this YouTube. But now that I'm aware of those things, let me stop beating myself. Let me start doing it today. So that's important in terms of not staying and focusing on things we did not do, because that's something, again, things we have control over and things we do not have control over is something that's going to be very beneficial. Because once you can see, oh, me focusing on things I could not do, I did not do in the past, I don't have control over it because it already happened, but I have control over start doing something today. Let me focus on that because I do have control over that. Like, hey, there were some friends that I was being an asshole to in the past. Well, that already happened. Let me be better today, starting today with my friends. So it's, again, going back to things we cannot control and things we can control. With anxiety, that's something that is very common. In anxiety, a lot of the fear is things in the future. Things that's going to happen in the future that we cannot control. And that causes anxiety because we're like, oh my God, this thing is coming. I don't know what to do. Versus us focusing on the present of like, what am I doing right now? Or, okay, I do not have control over this, but what part of it do I have control over? Let me start working on the part that I have control over. Because it could be anxious if you're thinking, oh my God, I need to clean the whole house. Very anxious. But if I'm like, let me clean the bathroom, it's less. So by me breaking it down into parts, it becomes easier. And one thing you've mentioned in earlier today that's also connecting with automatic negative thoughts and also connected to anxiety is, imagine when you were young, when you were like 5, there were like a small dog that went after you and beat you. That could have caused trauma because there were small dog that beat you. Now, what happened with some people is as they become an adult, They are no longer 5. They're an adult now. Let's say they are no longer 30 pounds. They're 200 pounds now. They're no longer 2 foot. They are 6 feet now. Their brain is stuck in that 5-year-old that was bit by a small dog. So now whenever they see small dogs, they get anxious. But it's because their brain is not connecting the fact that, hey, that happened to you when you were 5. You could not protect yourself when you were 5. You could not do anything about it when you were 5. But now you can protect yourself. So there's no reason for you to be anxious about that small dog again, because it's a different situation. So we see that sometimes happen with trauma, where something happened in the past at a point where we could not do something about it, but in the future, it still triggers us. And some people go to the point where instead of avoiding small dogs, they avoid dogs in general. Let me stay away from all dogs. And that connects back to what I said earlier. Your brain goal is to protect you. If you could stay away from all dogs, then you prevent 100% no dog's gonna bite you. And your brain is like, oh, if I can do that, then I'm protecting you. Versus your brain taking the chance of like, let me understand that was in the past and things gonna be okay. So your brain again is going back to like, if we just forget about dogs in general, we're gonna be in a better place. But that trauma can be present in so many ways, and that can cause anxiety as well. And sometimes it has to do with the thoughts we're having in our head. So sometimes addressing that thoughts, that in itself can be beneficial as well.
And you don't you don't build up that experience-based evidence. You've had that one experience with the small dog.
Yeah.
And then you don't build experience. Your brain physically can't. Your brain isn't making the link, and your brain physically can't comprehend that dogs are safe because it's deliberately, inadvertently, unbeknownst to you, making you avoid the dogs. So it can't teach you that dogs are safe.
Yeah, because now you're avoiding all dogs. But if you were to start meeting with one dog, oh, this one was good, this one was good, this one was good. Now you start having the evidence that dogs can be good. So
it is a hard one. Like for me as well, like I find myself just trying to have things that can make me present, can almost like snap out the anxiety or the depression. And again, a few people were joking, going, not a lot of lizard talk in here, but the lizards for me are my thing, are my zen. You know, they are what bring me, they do sometimes bring me turmoil, but they, for the most part, they bring me peace, and I can become present in the presence of my lizards. Whereas like sometimes with Fee, we'll be watching TV, and because it is my day-to-day, my normal, she's there, you know, she's my girlfriend. Dare I say it, past the honeymoon stage, been together like nearly 5 years now. So, you know what I mean? It's a constant. I know it's there. It's not the same. I don't know how to explain it, but because it's a part of my baseline, and it's not a peak, I can't get this present moment. So sometimes my brain will drift, and that's not her fault. That's not my fault. That's just, you know, it is. But for me, and it might not be the same for other people, but for me, it is my reptiles. And if I can get, like, when I get into a situation where I am stressing or worrying about anything, I can find a species of reptile, and I'll be like, right, someone mentioned tokay geckos. So I'll be like, tokay geckos. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about tokay geckos. And then I'm like, yeah, I want to get some tokay. And I'll hyperfixate on these tokay geckos. And it takes me away from my troubles and my trauma. And I just have to stop at the right point. Otherwise, all of a sudden, my brain's like, well, we do want a tokay gecko. So just giving myself a break and trying to do something that I enjoy, that I could just do in my head. Like sometimes I'll redesign my entire reptile room in my head whilst I'm at work. I'm not going to do it. It's just something to get me out of my head. It's a coping mechanism, but it seems to work for me, where I can just go, right, okay, well, I can put this lizard here, and I can move that lizard there, and I can do this, and this lizard will go in this enclosure, and I can redesign things. And I know that works for me. It is just a plaster, because the anxiety or the depression or the trauma, clearly I haven't found the root, but I'm at work. I have to be stoic in this instance. I'm in someone's house. I can't burst out crying. So for me, a good crutch, a healthy crutch, is just to go, right, how can I redesign my reptile room? Oh yeah, I do like reptiles. Yeah, I could put that there. Oh yeah, that's cool. And then that just gives me enough. And then when I'm in a safe environment where I can be vulnerable, I can sit with myself and go, right, why was I thinking about this today? What's the crack? Come on. Like normally my drive to and from work is normally where I have my alone time, because you're sort of forced to be with yourself when you're driving to and from work. So I normally do it on the way home rather than the way in, because sometimes things come up and I'm like, fuck, I've got to go to work now. But I do it on the way home, and I think about these different things. And I find it so strange sometimes when I talk to people and I'm like, oh yeah, do you know the voice in your head that just never shuts up? And some people go, no, like I just don't have these voices in my head. And I'm like, wow. Like, wow. Are you familiar with an artist called NF?
NF? No, I'm not.
Yeah, he's an American rapper. And he raps about like mental health and suicide and like this sort of stuff. And it's quite interesting listening to his journey, because he's very, very vulnerable in his music, and he's gone from being this depressed, angry person to his new album recently, forgiving his mum who's passed away, like accepting himself. He's honestly, it's amazing. I love it. And one of his songs is called Happy, and it's basically about he's been angry for so long, he doesn't know who he would be if he was happy. And that's what's scaring him, because he's been so angry for so long that he's scared to become happy. And this brings me back to a point that you touched on. I think it's so important to remember, because like you were saying, you know, you can change. You can't just be like, I'm Paul, the depressed electrician, because that's not me. That's just who I'm identifying as.
Yes.
You know, and we've said this a couple of times, but like he has got to this place now where he has realized that he's not Nate. His name is Nate. He's not Nate, the angry, depressed person. Like he wants to be happy, and he wants to be normal. He just doesn't know how, and he doesn't know what that looks like for himself. And he sings about this in his music. And like I say, I think it's 4 albums he's got. And you just go through a fucking journey with the man, and over years, obviously, but you go through this journey. And his most recent album was him basically having a mental breakdown, and he's had to go for work. And his album before his most recent album was him having a mental breakdown, maybe even psychosis, and having to go into like he calls it like rehab. And he has these like the music videos. There's one of his music videos, and he's like 30 years of running, 30 years of hate, 30 years of pain. Then it's like 30 years, and then like a demon voice comes in. It's like Nate, and it's got like this, and how I explain it, this juxtaposition of me and Paul's brain. He, in his music, he brings it together so well, because he's basically like 30 years of running from himself, 30 years of pain of himself. And it's like, some people don't get it, but for me, because it literally is like my life, and I'm like, fucking hell, like it speaks to my soul. And you can tell in his voice like the pain. And it's anyone who's interested, like I know a couple of people. Yes, NF. Yeah.
I think one thing you've mentioned that's important to address is there's research that's been done in the past where they took some rats and they were in an environment that had no food and no water.
This is Rat Park.
And they moved them to a place that had food and water. But whenever there was like a trigger, those rats would go back to the place that had no water and no drink and no food, because they were used to it.
Oh, okay.
And that is something we see as humans. We're like, if I'm always angry and I'm always depressed, and all of a sudden I start being happy, sometimes I'm waiting for the depression to come back. I'm waiting for the angriness to come back, because I'm used to it and I have control over it.
I do that.
When it's there, I know what to do. I know what's going to happen. But when I'm feeling happy, this is new to me. I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So that's something we see that is present, and that can make it hard as well, because whenever you start getting better, you're like, this is new. What do I do? And how long this is gonna last? And sometimes, because let's say you were happy before and you got back to depressed, so whenever that happiness comes, you do not want to stay close to it, because you're like, if I were to stay close to it and I were
It's
to
not
love
forever.
this,
Yeah.
whenever I go back to depressed, it's gonna hurt more. So instead, let me just be numb to it and let me just wait for the other shoe to fall. So I think that's something that's important, because as humans, whatever we fixate to, our brain gonna find evidence to support it. So if I'm referring to myself, like I used to say, I'm someone that could not remember people's name. I'm like, oh yes, I don't remember people's name. I don't remember people's name. Whenever I was saying that, my brain would help me support that evidence. My brain was like, yes, you're right. You are someone that do not remember people's name. So my brain know they had one job to do not remember people's name. But once I start saying, let me start remembering people's name, my brain now start finding ways to help me remember people's name. So I would see someone, I would say their name 5 times in my head. I would associate their name with something. And of course, it's taking time, but because I start feeding that to my brain is like, oh, let me support you in this because that's what you want to do. And for anyone that want to try this, I want you for 1 week, think of a specific car or specific color and start Googling it and looking for it. Out of nowhere, for the rest of the month, you're going to find yourself seeing that car more and more. That's not because that car was not present. It's simply because your brain, you have told your brain to look for it, and your brain gonna find it. You can do the same thing about color. You can take over a specific color, like, I'm into purple, and start Googling purple, like spend like a couple hours looking at that color. And out of nowhere, you're gonna be walking and you're gonna find that color everywhere. Not because it was not present, but because you have told your brain to look for it. And we do that without knowing so many times. When if I told myself, oh, I'm having a bad day, my brain gonna start reminding me of everything that support I'm having a bad day. Versus if I told myself, well, today was a bad day, but I had some good things that happened today, your brain gonna find it for you. So the brain again is tricky, but the brain is also very powerful. If you ask your brain to help you find something, your brain can become very good at it. So confirmation bias and self-prophecy are the two things that applies here. Confirmation bias is your brain gonna help you get confirmation to whatever you are saying. And self-prophecy refers to, if I say something is gonna happen, even though it was not gonna happen, I can cause it to happen. If I woke up today and I said I'm gonna have a bad day, although I was not going to have a bad day, I'm going to cause it to happen. A quick example for that is, let's say you go to a party and you said, you know what? No one's going to talk to me today. No one's going to talk to me at the party. Guess what happened when you get to the party? You stay by yourself. You're on your phone. You're not talking to anyone. So yes, no one talked to you, but it wasn't because no one was going to talk to you. It's because you put that perception in your head, and that perception caused you to act a certain way that caused what you had said to happen. So it is, again, I think anyone that's doing some research on the brain and learn about those things can really help you see how the brain is powerful. One, the brain can lie to you, but the brain can also support you.
It's manifestation. What's it called? The book's called The Secret. You just you believe it will happen effectively, but it's not in the spiritual realm. It's you're putting it out to the universe, and the universe listens, or God, or whoever you may choose to believe in. But in the actual science realm, if you ask the universe, I want to start seeing more purple cars, you'll start seeing them. But because you're associating your brain to do that, so they all work hand in hand. And again, with these top 1 percentile these people that are doing this 1% daily, and these people are manifesting. These people go, I'm the best. I'm going to be the best. They're not going, oh, this person's better than me, because by proxy, that person then is better than you, because you're teaching your brain that that person is better than you. So you have to be like, I'm the best. I'm the best. And when I started this social media stuff, you know, like I was very much like, I'm a nobody. I keep lizards. I just want to share. You know, I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody. And then I had like one video do like okay, and I got a few followers and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, all right, I can be a somebody, and it sort of, you know. And then of the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've really started to believe that I am a somebody, and we all are somebodies. Like, numbers to your name doesn't make you fucking somebody. Everyone's a somebody. But I was like, I'm helping people, and those people I'm helping are helping people, and I am making a difference, and my work is helping people with these animals. And since having that shift, I've never ever had a negative look on it, but I've never had a positive look on it. But since making that shift, I'm noticing more the people I'm helping. Whereas before, I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm helping. Yeah, and maybe I'm doing some. Now I've accepted that I am, because I've been doing it this whole time, but I've only just started to allow myself to see it. And I'm now picking out points and moments in time where I'm like, that's because of me. I've done this. This is by me. This is me. This is mine. This is this. And I'm trying not to let ego slip in, because obviously by going, oh yeah, I'm doing all this, you can get an ego, and it's okay to allow yourself to succeed, but not let it go to your head. And
that's true.
I'm not interested in the fame, the fortune, the glitz, the glamour, and the glory. I mean, I come on here to talk about how depressed I am and cry. So I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not doing this shit for any other reason. But I am now of the mindset that this could be something for me. Like, not necessarily monetarily, but just something. And it is, like, I was talking to one of my friends. I mean, I've said it on my other podcast, Riddler, a good friend of mine. And he was very much, and again, we've shared this publicly before, so I'm sure he won't mind me sharing. But he was very much like, I don't like my day job. I just want to work with animals. I want to do this. I want to do that. Blah 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 blah. In this circle of hate, and I can see a lot of myself in my old self, or in him now. And I said to him, I said, "What are you doing right now, Riddler?" He went, "What do you mean?" I said, "Literally, right this second, as you're voice noting me right now, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm just sitting in my animal room." I said, you said you want to wake up and work with your animals?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "What did you do today?" He said, "Well, I woke up and I've worked with my animals." I said, "You're too busy focusing on the fact that you've got to go to work later, that you're forgetting that what you want to do, you're doing it right now." And I'm very good at seeing this shit in other people, and I'm shit at seeing it in myself. And I'm sure a lot of people are the same. Like, you can see these patterns and recognitions because they are a product of you, and you have the experience. So you see them because you are them. And that's probably a good cue, actually. If you guys are good at spotting patterns in other people, you fucked. Get some help. I'm joking. But
so one thing you mentioned that's like really good is the fact that and again, so that could be a question for you is when you used to say I am nobody, what were your actions? And when you thought like, hey, I am somebody, what were your actions? Because for most people, when I'm saying I am a nobody, then the chances of me staying, making sure I am reaching out to people to be in the podcast, me making sure I'm producing content, me making sure I'm doing those things, you might find yourself not doing it as much because you thought you were nobody. But once you start believing like, hey, you know what? I can do this. It's not just the thoughts that you start having. Oftentimes, you start doing the actions as well. So you start like, hey, what do I need to do? How can I do this? So you start taking the steps. So it's one thing to say like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be good. But once you start saying I'm gonna be good, oftentimes you start taking the steps as well of like, okay, how can I get that done? What are the things that I need to do? So for you, when you thought you were nobody compared to when you start thinking like, you know what, I can make this work. How have your actions changed during those 2 times?
Just on that quickly, Fee has inadvertently reminded me it's 11 p.m. here, so I'll answer this and we'll get into some wrap-up questions if that's okay with you.
Yes.
But not to rush, but yeah. I don't think anything has changed.
Okay.
Like I would still do every single day, still post a video every single day. I would still put the same message out. I think there's two parts to it. To answer the question, the only thing that changed is purely that I notice that I'm helping people now, rather than I think I'm helping people, or rather than I'm doing this to no end. Like I can now see the fruit of my labor. Even though they were growing the whole time, I could just never see them. So that's the biggest change. But the biggest shift for me is when I started to put myself into my content. Like when I started to be vulnerable, and when I started to put some like what it means to be a reptile keeper to me, and why I do things that I do rather than this is a cool lizard. That for me was the biggest shift, and I had quite a lot of response from people, and I realized that there is this community underneath the surface where everybody's sort of itching to come out, because I've put a few posts up before that are very like open posts, and so many people comment their stories, which is incredible bravery by everybody that shares. And obviously they've just been waiting for the invitation. And that for me was probably the biggest change, is when I said that because I'd come on a podcast and talk about it, but I wouldn't necessarily post it on my Instagram, in the sense, not because I didn't want to, just because I thought people didn't care.
Yes.
And then once I let go of that, was almost like the liberating moment where I was like ego driven, but no one's doing this like me. Like no one is doing this like me. And I was like, no one is doing this like me. I need to do it because no one is doing it. And if you look at it from a business sense or an egotistical sense, that is how you become the best. You do something that no one else does, and you do it better than anybody else tries. And, you know, I've been doing social media for just a bit over a year now. YouTube's a bit slow, but Instagram's like nearly 38,000 followers. And it's like, when you comprehend that, I reach between 800,000 and 1 million people a month on Instagram. And it's like, fuck, like that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, that's just people that see my posts. It's not, that could just be a scroll past. They've seen it, you know, it's not actual true and great engagement. But I get over, I think it's like 80,000, between 50 and 80,000 engagements like a month. It's a lot of fucking people.
Yes.
And it's a lot of responsibility, because I could say something and these people might take me for gospel. So it's a lot of responsibility. And it's just a case of owning that it's just a case of owning that responsibility and being okay with myself to be able to share with people who I am.
I agree.
If that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Yes, thank you.
But yeah, we have 2 wrap-up questions. I'm gonna forget what they are. We have 2 wrap-up questions, and then we just end this out. But I'm sorry to cut it a little bit short. But what we'll do is, I'd love to have you back on, and we'll try and talk about lizards.
Yes. yes.
So we are going to start wrapping up, everyone. Bear with me because I always forget the wrap-up questions. Right. Wrap-up question number 1. What is the one piece of advice you would give to somebody starting the reptile hobby?
I think one piece of advice I would give to someone studying in the community is I think sometimes we look at other keepers and what they are doing, and we automatically want to do just like them. And I think that sometimes can be unhealthy because it could cause us to get a reptile that we are not ready for. Like, oh, I'm seeing all of those people getting lace monitors. Let me get one as well because this is the like this is it. This is what I have to get. So I think the advice is staying in your lane. Yes, pretty much staying in your lane is actually the advice. Is being able to understand where am I when it comes to financially, how much space do I have? How much time do I have to care for an animal? Is this animal the right fit for me? And actually starting from there. Don't try to do what you're saying other people are doing. Don't try to get animals that just because this person have this animal, I need to have it. Really take the time to research the animal you want and doing your research and start from there. So that would be my advice is actually staying in your lane. And I'm not saying stay in your lane like a negative way. I'm really saying it in like just know who you are and what works for you and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. And then the final wrap-up question, it normally changes, but for this one, I'm going to say, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Best piece of advice I've been given when it comes to reptiles or in general
No, life advice.
in life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question.
So I normally ask people this, and people normally go like, "Oh, I don't know, you put me on the spot." So I change it. I normally change it to like, I don't know, what piece of advice would you like to leave with these people?
No,
or
no,
what?
no. I do want to answer the one you asked because I think that's good. That's a good. Best piece of advice I've been given. I think. Let me think. Yeah, there we go. And I think this one connects. It also connects to what I've just mentioned. Is I remember like my dad have told me that my journey gonna be different than other people. So it is not a race because usually when we're running a race, we start at the same point and we go towards the same ending. But life is a different journey. Some people, when they are 60, they become successful. Someone becomes successful at 20, however you define that successful. But everyone's journey is different. And when you understand everyone's journey is different, you can look at other people for inspiration, but you should not look at other people and be jealous of what they have because their journey is very different than yours. And whenever you view your journey is different than other people, you no longer compare yourself to other people. You compare yourself with yourself. Where was I a year ago? Where was I 5 years ago? How am I doing this month? How am I doing next month? So I'm only comparing myself to myself. I can look at other people for inspiration, but I have to know that my journey is very different versus other people. So that would be that.
The answer to your question is very coincided with the answer to the advice of the reptile keepers: stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful place to end it.
I agree.
Thank you very much for your time, Daniel. I'm sorry that everybody listening, this hasn't been lizards, but I also feel like this is a massive part of me. So it's my platform. Get fucked. But yeah, thank you very much, mate, for coming on and allowing me to be vulnerable and listening and sharing your wisdom that's been instilled on you for the, I think you said 10 years, the 10, 11 years that you've been doing your career. But yeah, I'd love to have you back on and get more into sort of why you started it and a bit more about you. But
yes, for sure. Yes. I would love to come back. Yes.
Yeah, well, I'd love to have you back on. I genuinely appreciate it. I think this has been, this has been one of my favorite conversations because it's been real. It's not just been like, oh, lizards. Like it's been a real conversation, and I think the world needs a lot more real conversations. And I appreciate you for your time, mate, and thank you for coming on. It's a very fitting return to the podcast for me, and I thank you for being part of that.
Yeah, and I think one last thing I want to add. I think many times especially for men, we wait for people to pass away to give them their flowers. But I do want to give you your flowers right now, because what you're doing right now is very important, and it's also very needed. And so many people do not want to come, especially online, to share with other people what they've dealt with. So the fact that you're coming here to share, like, hey, because you could have easily let people believe that, like, hey, I am this wonderful guy that can listen.
And I
But
am.
instead, you have decided to share that part of you, and it is benefiting so many people. So I would say thank you as well. So thank you for doing that.
No, I appreciate it, man. Honestly, this has been a great conversation, and I didn't expect you to say that, because the saying of "give them the flowers after they died," like, I like that saying, and then you were nice to me, so that took me off guard. So I appreciate the kind words. Everyone is loving you in the chat. I'm gonna leave everyone, because it's getting late here, and your boy's been up early because my child. But I thank you everyone for tuning in. Samuel's links are to both. I don't know if you've got like a website or anything, but I found both your Instagrams. Your Instagrams are in the link below. If there's any other links, send them to me. I'll put them in the description. But Samuel's links are in the link below. Please check him out, everyone. Like, honestly, mate.
Thank you, everyone.
I've loved this. I'm gonna love and leave you all, because I normally just ramble, but I am just gonna end it. So like, comment, subscribe. Remember, share with thy neighbor, and own your sadness. Yeah, feel it, breathe it. Talk about it. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. I know everyone's going to keep commenting, but I'm sorry, I'm going to have to end this. Otherwise, we're going to be here for all night. And I love you all. I will see you next Sunday with another guest. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone.